Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable and relax. During the 2007, our family of four, me, my little brother, mom and dad, moved to a new house. It was not the best phase of our lives at that time. We had to sell our first house and had to move to a cheaper area. The new house that my father had rented was owned by that town's very well-known ex-attorney who was also an old friend to my grandfather. No wonder he rented us the house for such cheaper price. The attorney had 3 children, the eldest daughter who was married with 2 kids, a son who was a medical student, and the youngest daughter who sadly passed away from a fire accident a few years back. The first 2 siblings stay out of the town. My dad was an alcoholic, abusive to my mom, and emotionally absent. My mother was emotionally unstable, bipolar, had serious anger issues. Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable and relax. During the 2007, our family of 4, me, my little brother, mom and dad, moved to a new house. It was not the best phase of our lives at that time. We had to sell our first house and had to move to a cheaper area. The new house that my father had rented was owned by that town's very well-known ex-attorney who was also an old friend to my grandfather. No wonder he rented us the house for such cheaper price. The attorney had 3 children, the eldest daughter who was married with 2 kids, a son who was a medical student, and the youngest daughter who sadly passed away from a fire accident a few years back. The first 2 siblings stay out of the town. My dad was an alcoholic, abusive to my mom, and emotionally absent. My mother was emotionally unstable, bipolar, had serious anger issues, and often suffered from severe depression because of my dad and his unfaithful behavior. During that time, my grandma, father's mom, got sick with lung cancer and started staying with us. Needless to say that the environment at our home became very gloomy and depressing. She and I took the 2 rooms downstairs. Upstairs had one more room where my mom and dad stayed with my little brother. A few weeks later, I discovered something very shocking about the house from school rumors. My classmates would tell me that the youngest daughter of that attorney had committed suicide by setting herself on fire, and that it was not an accident. At first, I didn't believe them, but everyone I had asked, starting from my older cousins to my aunt, they all said the same thing but warned me to never speak about it in front of the owners because that's how they wanted to keep it. The most disturbing thing was when I found out that my room was her room, and she killed herself in my room. My childlike brain was very disturbed by the knowledge, but it was apparently very amusing to my classmates, and they kept asking me if I felt anything paranormal inside the house. But it never felt haunted ever. Not until 6 months. Odd things started to happen. My room was next to the kitchen, separated by a wooden door which had a crack and light could pass through it. One night, I woke up to a sound of someone chewing in the kitchen, but fell asleep again in a minute or two, thinking someone might be having a midnight snack. The next morning before breakfast, my mom started to complain that the eggs were missing. This happened a couple of more times, that food items such as eggs, 3 fishes from the curry, pieces of fried chicken started going missing. I heard my mom complaining to my aunt on the phone that my grandma was going crazy and she is eating up all the food at night because she was on a diet restriction during the day. I confronted my grandma, but she always changed the topic. I disliked the fact that she is stressing out my mom knowing she is already suffering emotionally because her abusive son. Moreover, since her cancer treatment started to become more expensive, my father had to cut off my little brother's baby formulas and bought the cheap ones which my brother hated, and also stopped my mother's medications. One night, I decided to stay awake to catch her red-handed. I tried my best to not fall asleep, but unfortunately I did around 1:30 a.m. I frantically woke up half an hour later and remembered what I had planned. But tonight I didn't hear anything from the kitchen. In fact, I have not heard the chewing sound except once. Maybe she became a little too cautious of getting caught now. I tried to peek outside from the crack of my bedroom door, although I could barely see anything because everything was dark until the light from the open fridge made it clear. Someone had opened the fridge. My grandmother had very short hair and almost balding from all the chemotherapy she's been taking. But the thing I saw was full of hair in its head. The fridge was wide open and a woman with frizzy and open hair, seemingly naked, was sitting like a frog in front of the fridge and staring still at it. I couldn't see the face because it was back facing my door. I froze for a minute and felt like my heart was gonna stop. I somehow mastered the courage to go back to my bed because there was no way of getting out of the room as I had to pass through the kitchen. I don't know for how long I sat still on my bed. After a while, I started hearing the birds chirping outside and the sun was rising. I heard the front doorbell ring and it was my dad and he was drunk as usual. I checked the clock. It was 4:45 a.m. I went to school that morning and the first thing I did was I told my classmates that I finally saw it. Their eyes and mouth were wide open and I could see goosebumps on their hands. I enjoyed the attention at school that day, but I didn't have the courage to tell this to my dying grandma and overworked, depressed mom. A month had passed and I hadn't experienced anything except weird sounds of someone hopping on the floor, loud breathing from unknown source, but those used to last hardly few minutes. I started getting used to it and almost forgot about it as I was getting quite busy with schoolwork and activities. My grandma was getting sicker, but my mother couldn't stand her. TBH, she hated my dad's side of the family. I was getting kind of annoyed with my mother and her frequent bickering against my grandma. My dad started becoming even more absent. He just threw money at us and left the house every now and then and won't show up for a day or two. My mother was getting unstable each day, and her anger issues started getting severe. She would stomp all over the house, slam doors and utensils all over. It was getting very uncomfortable staying with her and I didn't feel safe. I tried speaking to my aunt and she said she would visit us soon and start her medications again. Until then, I should keep an eye on my small brother. All these things made me forget about the paranormal activities at the house. That night, I fell asleep very quickly after a long day at school. I was woken up yet again in the middle of the night by something falling on the kitchen floor like a spoon or a knife. I felt the same nervousness as the first day, but I didn't see anyone in the kitchen as I peeked through my door. I was too sleepy to be bothered, so I came back to my bed and fell asleep again. The peace of sleep didn't last long. I woke up again with a feeling that someone was right at the door. I went to peek again, but no one was there, until something inside my head told me to peek down through the crack of the door. There it was, the same figure. Frizzy open hair, sitting like a frog, seemingly naked. But this time it was not sitting in front of the fridge. It was very close to my bedroom door and back facing it. I tried to scream at the top of my lungs, but it felt like I had lost my vocal cords. The scream finally came out after a few seconds. My grandma came running to the door asking me what happened. I could see that she could barely walk now and she was all skin and bones like she is up from death. I explained her everything. She stared at me quite oddly. My mom came running from upstairs and I told her everything too. She offered me to sleep with her that night and said I was probably having a sleep paralysis, and that it happens to us sometimes when the body is tired. I understood she inclined towards my long day at school, which made sense. After that incident, I again did not see or experience anything terrifying for many days, and my grandma passed away within the next 2 weeks. What unsettles me to this date, when I was giving her company before her last day at the hospital, she didn't speak to me at all. So I decided to go back home and take some rest. "Grandma, I'm going home for a few hours. I will be back in the evening, don't worry." I whispered at her ears. It was her. She whispered back in her dying voice. "Huh?" I asked, totally clueless. "Don't make your mother angry." My grandmother's last words. My name is Thomas. After my first night as a security guard at the abandoned St. Mary's Hospital, I feel compelled to share my story. I thought it would be an easy job, walking rounds, checking doors, earning easy money without a boss constantly breathing down my neck. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. After months of temporary jobs and mounting debt, I had no choice. St. Mary's offered stability, but what I didn't know was that this hospital had its own set of rules that had to be followed, or else you'd disappear. My first shift began with a meeting with Marco, the senior guard, a broad-shouldered man with a grim face hardened by years of working in this place. He barely looked up from his coffee when he greeted me. "You're the new guy?" he asked without lifting his gaze from the table. "Yeah, Thomas," I replied, extending my hand. He ignored it and instead pointed to the chair across from him. "Listen up, kid," he started, his tone serious. "This isn't a normal job. There are rules. You follow them or you're gone. Simple." I frowned. What do you mean? Rule 1. If you hear footsteps behind you when you're alone, don't stop. Don't look back, just keep walking. My heart skipped a beat. Rule 2. The third floor. You only go up there if you have no other choice. The stairwell is a trap. People who go up don't always come back. Why not? Marco stared at me. Don't ask too many questions. Rules 3 and 4. If you see something that shouldn't be there, like a door opening on its own or a light turning on, ignore it. And if you see people where they shouldn't be, stay away. They want you to come to them. A chill ran down my spine. And the last rule? I asked softly. If a room suddenly feels much colder than normal, don't go inside. And if you see something move that you can't explain, turn around and walk away. This building responds to your presence. An uneasy silence followed. I wanted to laugh, to call his bluff, but Marco's stare was unwavering. We started our rounds through the hospital. The hallways were empty, the walls yellowed with age. The air was cold, as if the building itself was hiding something. As we walked, I heard a faint beeping in the distance. A door? The sound seemed to come from a corridor we had just passed. You'll hear noises like that often, Marco muttered without turning around. Ignore them. The silence grew heavier. Suddenly, I heard something else. A soft whisper, like voices just beyond my hearing. It sounded as if they were floating through the halls. When I stopped to listen, the sound vanished instantly. This hospital is alive, Marco said, in its own way. I shivered. As we continued walking, Marco told me about St. Mary's history. In the 1950s, the hospital was known for its experimental medicine. Electroshock therapy, medically induced comas, unethical brain surgeries, he listed. They pushed the limits of science, and sometimes they went too far. Patients disappeared. Families received letters saying their loved ones had been transferred, but no one ever heard from them again. What happened to them? I asked nervously. No one knows for sure, Marco answered, but some experiments never stop. His words lingered as we walked on. The hallways seemed longer, darker, and then it happened. The temperature dropped suddenly. An icy chill wrapped around us as if we were not alone. Marco, do you feel that? I asked, my voice shaking. He stopped and gave me a firm look. Keep walking, don't stop. Ahead of us stood the stairwell door. It was open. I remembered Marco's warning. The third floor is a trap. From the darkness came a soft scraping sound, like something dragging against the wall. This isn't good, Marco whispered. We need to leave. My breath hitched. What's up there? Marco was silent for a moment, then, almost inaudibly, he said, something that was never meant to remain. We turned around and walked back. But then around the corner, in the middle of the hallway, stood a hospital bed. It was brand new, pristine white. And beneath the sheet lay a body. My blood ran cold. When we looked away for just a second and then back, the bed was gone. The hallway was empty. The tension in the air slowly faded, as if something had decided to let us go. Back in the security office, I felt relieved. The rest of the night passed without incident. But as I walked outside, I heard it again. The scraping, the breathing, the footsteps just beyond my hearing, but following my every step. When I reached the elevator and pressed the button, I clearly heard someone breathing behind me. Outside, I took a deep breath, but one question lingered in my mind. Should I come back tomorrow? The change began the night I shouldn't have gone into the woods. Everyone in town knew the stories. Warnings whispered around campfires and scrawled onto faded signs at the edge of the forest. Don't wander after dark. Stay away from the deep trails. Beware from the skinwalker. I'd always thought it was bullshit. Folklore to keep kids out of trouble or scare away tourists. But that night, something pulled me in. I don't remember why I went. Maybe I needed to clear my head, or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't scared. I followed the trail deeper than I ever had before, the air growing colder, the trees twisting into shapes that looked almost human. Then I heard it. A voice, soft and familiar, calling my name. Ethan, I froze. It was my mother's voice, but it couldn't have been. She'd been dead for 5 years. Ethan, come here. I turned slowly, my heart pounding, and saw something in the shadows. A figure tall and gaunt, its skin stretched too tightly over its bones. Its face was wrong. almost human but not quite, its eyes glinting like a predator's in the moonlight. And it was smiling. I ran. I didn't sleep that night. The memory of the figure haunted me, its voice, its smile, the way it seemed to know me. I locked my doors, shut my windows, and told myself it was just my imagination. But the next morning, I noticed the first change. The sunlight hurt. Not in the usual way, not like squinting after waking up too early. This was deeper, sharper, like needles stabbing into my eyes. By the time I got to work, my senses were dialed up to 11. The hum of the fluorescent lights was deafening. I could hear my co-workers' conversations from across the room, smell the stale coffee in the break room from my desk. And then there was the hunger. It wasn't like I was starving. It was something else. Something deeper. A craving I couldn't place. At lunch, I sat with Sarah, my closest friend. She was laughing about something, but I wasn't paying attention. All I could focus on was the way her pulse beat in her neck, the faint smell of sweat and soap on her skin. I had to excuse myself before I did something I couldn't explain. By the end of the week, I couldn't deny that something was happening to me. I could run faster than I ever had before, my legs carrying me through the woods at an inhuman speed. My senses were sharper than ever, every sound, every scent, every flicker of movement painting a vivid picture of the world around me. And I loved it. I wasn't scared anymore. The fear that had gripped me after that night in the woods was gone, replaced by something new. Exhilaration. Power. For the first time in my life, I felt alive. I started testing my abilities in small ways, lifting heavy objects, sneaking up on people without making a sound. Once I mimicked Sarah's voice perfectly, watching her spin around in confusion when she heard her name. It was addictive. I didn't care that I was changing. I didn't care that my reflection in the mirror seemed off, my eyes darker, my teeth sharper. I wanted more. The cravings became impossible to ignore. Normal food didn't satisfy me anymore. No matter how much I ate, the hunger gnawed at me, a constant, insistent pull that wouldn't let me rest. One night I found myself wandering the streets, drawn by the scent of something warm and alive. I didn't mean to hurt the stray dog. I didn't even know what I was doing until it was over, until I was crouched over its still body, my hands slick with blood, my teeth aching. But I didn't feel guilt. I felt satisfied. The changes weren't just physical anymore. I stopped going to work, stopped answering Sarah's texts. The idea of being around people made my skin crawl. They smelled too good, too tempting, and I wasn't sure I could control myself anymore. The voice started a week later. At first, I thought it was my own thoughts, but it didn't take long to realize it wasn't me. It whispered in the back of my mind, soft and insistent. Take what you need. They won't stop you. You're not like them anymore. And it was right. I wasn't. One night I caught my reflection in the window and barely recognized myself. My skin was stretched tight over my bones, my eyes glowing faintly in the dark. My teeth had grown sharper, my fingers longer, tipped with claws. But what struck me most was my smile. It wasn't mine, it was the creature's. I should have been horrified, but I wasn't. The fear was long gone, replaced by something darker. I liked what I was becoming, and I wanted to see how far I could go. I didn't choose Sarah because I hated her. I chose her because she trusted me. She invited me over, worried about how distant I'd been. She tried to talk to me, to pull me out of whatever she thought was wrong. I let her think she could save me. It was almost too easy. Her voice, her mannerisms, her scent, I absorbed them all, wearing them like a second skin. By the time I left her house, I wasn't just Ethan anymore. I was Sarah. I spent the next few weeks wearing her face, her voice, her life. Her coworkers didn't notice the difference. Her family didn't suspect a thing. I felt invincible. But the voice wasn't satisfied. It whispered to me constantly now, urging me to take more, to lose myself completely. You don't need to pretend, it said. You're not human anymore. You're better than them. And it was right. I didn't need to pretend. I didn't need to hold on to my old life. I could be anyone. Anything. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the thing I'd become. The hunger was all-consuming now. My body barely human. My mind teetering on the edge of something dark and infinite. The voice urged me to let go, to embrace the transformation completely. But deep down, a small part of me hesitated. I thought about Sarah, about the way she'd looked at me before I took her face. I thought about who I used to be, the life I'd had before the woods. Did I want to hold on to that, or was it better to let it all burn? Next day I visited the woods, and it's welcomed me like an old friend. The towering trees, the shifting shadows, the distant rustle of unseen creatures. All of it felt alive in a way it never had before. I moved through the underbrush silently, my new body attuned to every sound, every scent. It didn't take long to find my first prey. A group of campers sat around a fire, their laughter echoing through the forest. I watched them from the shadows, my glowing eyes reflecting the flickering flames. They smelled incredible. The salt of their sweat, the tang of their fear, the faint sweetness of their skin made my mouth watered. But I didn't rush in. I waited, crouched in the dark, savoring the moment. When I finally stepped into the light, their screams were music to my ears. I didn't just kill them. I became them. Their voices, their faces, their memories, all of it was mine now. When I left the campsite, I wore the face of a young man named David. His life, his mannerisms, his laugh, it all felt like second nature, as though I'd been David my whole life. But the hunger didn't stop. It never stopped. Every time I fed, it grew louder, more insistent. The voice inside me whispered constantly now, urging me to take more, to lose myself completely. "You're not one of them anymore," it said. "You're a predator. Embrace it." And I did. I walked into towns and cities wearing stolen faces, blending in perfectly. No one suspected a thing. I was everyone and no one, a ghost moving through the world. But the more I fed, the less I recognized myself. One night I caught my reflection in a car window and froze. It wasn't David's face staring back at me, or Sarah's, or anyone else's. It was something monstrous, a patchwork of features, shifting and blending in impossible ways. My eyes glowed faintly, my teeth too sharp, my smile stretched too wide. I stepped back, my chest tightening. "Who am I?" I whispered. The voice laughed, low and cruel. "You're whatever you want to be." But that wasn't true, not anymore. The faces I wore, the lives I stole, they weren't choices. They were masks, and the thing beneath them was hollow. For the first time, the hunger didn't feel exhilarating. It felt empty. The turning point came when I returned to my hometown. I didn't plan to. I hadn't even thought about it. But something inside me pulled me back, guiding me through the familiar streets, the familiar sights. And there, standing in the front yard of my old house, was my younger brother, Eric. He didn't see me at first. He was laughing with his friends, tossing a football back and forth, completely unaware of the thing lurking in the shadows. I should have left, but I didn't. I stepped forward, the hunger roaring in my chest. Eric turned, his smile fading as he saw me. "Ethan," he said, his voice soft, uncertain. Hearing my name hurt more than I expected. Eric approached slowly, his brow furrowed. "Is it really you?" he asked. I nodded, my throat tightening. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. "You look different," he said finally. "What happened to you?" The hunger screamed at me to take him, to absorb his life, his memories, his warmth. But for the first time, I hesitated. Eric was the last thread connecting me to who I used to be. He was the only person who still thought of me as human. And I realized I didn't want to lose that. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "For what?" he asked, confused. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and ran, the shadows swallowing me whole. The voice was furious. "You're weak," it hissed. "He was yours. You could have taken him. You should have taken him." But I didn't listen. Not anymore. For weeks I wandered aimlessly, the hunger gnawing at me, the voice screaming in my head. My body was falling apart, shifting uncontrollably. My reflection barely recognizable. I was losing myself. And then I realized what I had to do. The answer was in the woods, where it had all begun. I returned to the spot where I'd first seen the creature, the place where my transformation had started. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the trees looming like silent witnesses. There, in the clearing, I found it. The creature. It was waiting for me, its gaunt form motionless, its glowing eyes watching as I stepped forward. "You knew this would happen," I said, my voice steady. It tilted its head, a grotesque smile spreading across its face. "You wanted me to become like you," I continued. "But I'm not. Not yet." The creature's smile widened, its voice low and guttural. "Then finish it," it said. "Take the final step. Become what you were meant to be." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the hunting knife I'd brought with me. The creature's eyes gleamed with anticipation as I stepped closer, the blade glinting in the moonlight. But I didn't use it on the creature, I used it on myself. Hit into my arm, deep and deliberate and black, viscous blood oozed from the wound. The creature's smile faltered as I let the blood drip onto the ground, forming a circle around us. "What are you doing?" it growled, its voice tinged with fear. "I'm ending this," I said, my voice steady. The blood circle flared to life, the ground trembling beneath our feet. The creature shrieked, its form writhing as the circle tightened, pulling it inward. "You can't stop it," it screamed. "You'll always be one of us." I stared at it, my body trembling. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." The circle collapsed, dragging the creature into the earth. The air grew silent, the shadows retreating, and for the first time the hunger was gone. I don't know what I am anymore. I'm not human, not completely. My reflection is still wrong, my sense is still too sharp, but the hunger is gone and the voice is silent. I live alone now, far from anyone I could hurt. The woods are my home, a constant reminder of what I almost became. Sometimes I think about Eric and myself, about the life I left behind. I wonder if he remembers me, if he still hopes I'll come back. But I can't go back. Not yet. Because no matter how much I've fought it, no matter how much I've resisted, I know the creature was right. I'll always be one of them. It wasn't the sound of distant thunder that woke me up yesterday morning. No, it was the gentle tap-tap-tap of rain trickling down my forehead that caused my eyelids to slightly flutter open. The sensation was a little too delicate to wake me up completely, so I briefly lingered in a state of drowsy half-sleep. Before long, though, a cold droplet unexpectedly splashed onto my left eye, exorcising any remaining grogginess and jolting me fully awake. I shot up in bed. Dark clouds hung ominously over the early morning horizon. It looked like a nasty storm was rolling through, but that didn't explain how the precipitation had made its way inside. Just then, a faint beam of light appeared, cast down from somewhere up above. It fell from my bedroom ceiling and landed on my pillow, exactly where my head had been a few moments prior. The spotlight was small and rounded, its diameter no larger than a quarter. My gaze traveled up the beam until I saw what I was looking for, a perfect circular hole in my roof. The clouds over my home had parted, allowing a ray of sunlight to find its way through the opening. I rubbed sleep from my eyes and looked again, assuming I was seeing something that wasn't actually there. But as my vision refocused, the hole became clearer. It was entirely too symmetric to have occurred naturally, like a cookie cutter had been used to create it. If I didn't know any better, I'd say it looked like a peephole. But that implied that someone was scaling my home in the middle of the night, silently watching me sleep by placing one eye over the tiny hole, only to climb back down before I woke up in the morning. As the hair on the back of my neck started to rise, fear swelling in my chest, I suppressed the idea. Logically, it was absurd. Why would anyone do that? I mean, what would be the point? How could I have never noticed? The meds do make me a pretty deep sleeper, I thought. Sleep has been a big issue for me my whole life. No matter how much I get, I never wake up rested. When I was a kid, my parents were concerned about how it was affecting my performance at school. But I was much more fixated on the recurring nightmares. Every night, without fail, I'd dream of the skidder. It would start with me floating in the air like a spirit. Sometimes I'd be outside. Sometimes I'd be in a house I didn't recognize, but it'd always be in the dead of night. Before long, I'd see it below me. A long, slender shadow, flat and motionless on the ground like the outline of a fire hose. No matter how dark it was, I'd still be able to discern its shape. Its blackness was so much deeper, so much emptier than normal darkness that it would give the long shadow contrast. The silhouette of a demon impossibly framed by a lightless night. After I witnessed the shadow move and eat for the first time, I named it the skidder. I'd hover a few feet over the creature, unable to fly away when someone would appear. It was different every time, and it didn't matter who they were. Could be a mother walking home from a graveyard shift, an elderly man entering his bathroom, a child walking down the stairs on their way to get a midnight snack. The skidder took them all the same. They'd looked in its direction but never could see it like I could. Once they had their backs turned, thousands of writhing legs would jut out of the skidder's two-dimensional body. The appendages would feverishly squirm, silently propelling it forward like a hellish centipede. When it was under its prey's feet, they would fall through the floor and into the skidder. I watched helplessly as their distorted, flattened bodies slid down the length of its shadow, faces stretched and contorted into expressions of unimaginable pain and terror. Then I'd wake up, and it'd be morning. My parents took me to a neurologist. After I saw them, I had to see a bunch more doctors, endured plenty of odd high-tech tests. Eventually, I was diagnosed with a type of epilepsy that only occurs during sleep. The next day, I started some before-bed anti-seizure medications. I still never felt rested, but I went decades without dreaming of the skidder. That was good enough for me. For a few days last year, right after I moved into my current home, the nightmares returned. But before I could even make an appointment with a new sleep doctor, they abruptly went away. In retrospect, I now know why they went away. Someone installed the peephole. Once I had some breakfast in me, I walked over to my neighbor's house to ask if I could borrow a ladder. I found Andrew working under his car in the garage. Even though I did my best to announce my entrance softly, the man still nearly jumped out of his own skin, smashing his skull into the undercarriage of his sedan as the words, "Morning Andrew," escaped from my lips. After emitting a loud groan of pain, he carefully slid his body out and stood up. Morning, Pete," he said, rubbing the soon-to-be welt on the top of his head. "Sorry, bud, didn't mean to startle you. Could I borrow a ladder? There's a leak somewhere in my roof." He paused for a moment, fiercely contemplating his reply like I had asked him the meaning of life. "Don't think I have one, actually. You think the leak could wait? I can bring one home from work later this week." From my vantage point, I could see the top two stairs of a wooden ladder peeking out from behind a large metal cabinet, only 5 feet behind him. Nodding my head in the ladder's direction, I responded, "You sure?" Andrew reluctantly turned around, forcing a chuckle once he saw the tips of the ladder as well. "Right. Forgot about that one. Yeah, I guess that's fine." With the ladder held under my armpit, I began walking back onto my side of the lawn. When I reached the halfway point, I realized I hadn't thanked Andrew. His behavior was so awkward that I had forgotten my manners. I turned around and shouted, "Thanks, buddy. I'll have it back as soon as I patch the leak." But I don't believe he heard me. My neighbor was now at the back of his garage on a call with someone, talking low but gesturing the hand that wasn't holding his phone with urgency. Something about his behavior was completely off. As I placed the ladder against the side of my house, I noticed something else too. I could have sworn my neighbor across the street was observing me behind a curtained window on the second floor of their house, ducking their head away only once they noticed that I saw them. The peephole was significantly more disturbing up close. I could lie down on my stomach with one eye looking through it comfortably, and it had a perfect view of where I slept. My imagination drifted to the thought of me in bed while someone spied on my sleeping body from a secret hole in my roof, and it caused a violent chill to radiate down my neck. It wasn't a new renovation either. I found evidence that whoever made the hole did not make it recently. There was a piece of black tarp large enough to cover the orifice hanging by a nail aside from it. Upon closer inspection, I discovered 3 smaller holes around the peephole's perimeter in the shape of a square, their insides corrugated to show other nails had been there at some point. The one nail, almost dislodged, clung to the tarp by a thread. Rust coated the head, indicating that it had been there quite a while. As I pulled the nail out, the purpose of the tarp became clear. Whoever made the peephole nailed it over the gap before they left in the early morning. That way, I wouldn't be able to tell it was there during the day by sunlight shining through. The storm this morning, however, must have pulled it loose. I pocketed the sliver of tarp and returned the ladder to Andrew. Before I went to bed that night, I used it to cover the peephole from the inside. I also locked my bedroom door and put my wardrobe in front of it as a barricade. Leaned my large bookcase against the window, blocking that potential entrance as well. Against my expectations, I did not sleep soundly, but I woke up feeling rested. The dream last night was the most vivid I've had in recent memory. It started with me lying motionless on some hallway floor, my back to the ground so I'm staring up at the ceiling. I want to get up because I'm intensely hungry, but I know that it's not time yet. Somewhere down the hallway I can feel someone looking at me even if they can't actually see me. I have to wait until they aren't looking at me. The soft thumping of footsteps began coming down the hallway towards me. A foot lands on what should be my face, but it doesn't hurt. In fact, it doesn't feel like anything at all. Once I can see his back, I push as hard as I can, causing sharp pains all throughout my body. But with the pain, I know I can move again. It feels like I have 1,000 fingers and they're all silently tapping against the wood tile as I furiously sprint. When I'm under him, I dislocate my jaw, and he falls through me. I see his face for a split second as he drops into my gullet. It's Andrew. I woke up with Andrew's phone on my nightstand this morning. There was a notification for a new email. I'm unable to open the device without his password, but I can still read the title of the correspondence. May have found out about suppressive observation window containment. I figured I'd experience a certain horror after truly experiencing my nighttime metamorphosis, but that feeling is blunted by another sensation. Finally, I feel rested and full. Whoever Andrew was and whatever institution he represents, they've prevented that feeling. I'm convinced the meds I've been taking are sedatives, not anti-seizure medications. They want me sleeping soundly so I don't wake up when they climb up the side of my house. They've been watching me at night, so when I change, I'm unable to move. They might have been doing it when I was a kid, too. Maybe they told my parents, maybe they didn't. Andrew was home last night, so maybe he wasn't the actual watcher. Maybe he was more of a coordinator. Or maybe the whole neighborhood takes shifts. In the end, it doesn't matter who he was. All that matters is that you take heed. If any of this sounds familiar, if you think you may be part of that same institution as Andrew was, this is your only warning. I do not plan on ever feeling empty again. As for Andrew, he's still here, alive within me, dissolving slowly. I still have plenty of room if you're looking to keep him company. But if you're smart, you'll just stay away. I don't expect anyone to believe this story. I don't even believe it myself. I just need to get it out, I guess. I need someone to hear it, someone who might understand or who might have had a similar experience, because I can't shake the feeling that I'm losing my mind. I'm a broke college student. I don't have much money, so when I saw this house for rent, I thought, perfect. It was so cheap, I couldn't pass it up. I know it sounds like something out of a horror movie, like The Conjuring or something, right? A person rents a super cheap place in the middle of nowhere and it's haunted. But I don't believe in ghosts. Even if they exist, what does it matter? I just needed a place to live, somewhere quiet. So I rented it. The first 2 weeks were fine. I unpacked my stuff and settled in. The house was isolated, tucked away in the woods with no neighbors nearby, and that suited me just fine. I liked the peace and quiet. But then there was a smell. At first I thought maybe it was just a dead animal nearby, a raccoon or a squirrel or something, but it wasn't that bad. It didn't bother me too much. Couple of times I saw tiny handprints on my windows and mirror. As I said, I don't believe in paranormal, but this did creepy me a bit. But as the days passed, the smell got worse. It was so strong it was almost unbearable. I sprayed perfume, I cleaned every inch of the house, but it didn't go away. I tried to ignore it. Finals were coming up and I needed to focus. I didn't have time to dwell on the smell. But then things got stranger. My keys. I'd set them down in one place, and the next time I went to grab them, they were somewhere else entirely. I live alone, there's no one else around. I don't have roommates, no one visits unannounced. At first I thought maybe I was just being forgetful. Maybe my friend had come over when I wasn't home, moved them around, but that didn't feel right either. And then it started happening more often. My stuff kept disappearing, or it would be in a completely different place. But the weirdest thing was that I started seeing things. Shadows out of the corner of my eye, moving when nothing was there. It was subtle at first, so I told myself I was just tired, that I had a lot on my plate. But then it escalated. I started hearing things, footsteps, whispers, soft knocking on the walls. I didn't tell anyone. I figured I'd just let it pass. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe the house was old, creaky. That night, everything changed. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard a scream, a blood-curdling scream. It sounded like someone was in pain or in danger. I shot out of bed, my heart hammering in my chest, and ran outside, thinking someone was hurt. But there was nothing. The yard was empty. Dead silence. I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a dream? But I knew I had heard it. It was real. I went back inside, trying to shake off the fear. I told myself it was just a bad dream, that I was stressed out from school. But when I got to the stairs, that's when I heard it again. My bedroom door slammed shut. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My bedroom door didn't even have a lock, but now it was locked. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me and I backed away slowly, unsure of what to do. I called the police. The whole situation felt unreal. The police came, but they didn't understand. They didn't believe me. It's probably just an animal, they said. There wasn't any evidence of forced entry, even though they searched the house several times. In few days, scratching started. It was faint at first, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. I could hear it clearly, even though I knew no one else was there. The sound made my skin crawl. I couldn't get away from it. The next few days were even worse. I began to see more shadows. These weren't just glimpses from the corner of my eye anymore. These were full figures, dark human-shaped things lurking in the corners of my vision. I'd turn to look, and they'd vanish. I felt watched. It felt like I was losing my mind. The strangest part, though, was the noises. At night, when I was trying to sleep, I'd hear the whispers. It sounded like children. It sounded like they were crying for help. It was like they were inside my head, begging for me to do something, but I didn't know what. I didn't know how to help. I thought I was going crazy. One night I woke up to the sound of laughter, soft, high-pitched. Children's laughter echoing through the house. I ran to the living room, but no one was there. The room was empty, and yet the laughter continued, as though it was coming from every direction. That's when I started to realize this wasn't just some old house. Something was very wrong. That was it for me. I packed up and left. I didn't tell anyone, didn't explain to the landlord. I just grabbed my stuff and left. I stayed with my parents for a couple of weeks. I didn't want to go back to that house, didn't want to face whatever was there. Then one day I drove by to grab some of my things I'd left behind. I wasn't expecting much, but when I pulled up I saw the police tape. Yellow caution tape surrounded the house and a team of officers were there. The house was gone, just a pile of ashes. And when I saw the news a few days later, I was horrified. The police had found remains, human remains, in the walls. The bones were tiny, so small they could have only been children. They'd been hidden inside the walls for who knows how long. I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't need to. They had no reason to suspect me. I had an alibi. But something inside me knew that the house was gone for a reason. Those spirits, those tortured souls had never left. Every time I close my eyes, I can still hear those children whispering my name. I've told this story several times. I still think about this to this day. My family has always had a knack for collections. My mother hoarded porcelain cats, each one numbered and named. Their tiny painted faces lined up in neat rows on shelves that ran the length of the living room. My father curated shelves of vintage cameras, each meticulously labeled with its make and year. He spent hours in his darkroom polishing lenses with obsessive care, murmuring to himself like a priest before an altar. My older sister cataloged every movie ticket she ever bought, arranged chronologically and cross-referenced by director. Even as a teenager, she carried a battered ledger everywhere, making careful notations about runtime, cast, and box office performance. Me? I never had a collection. I hated how those obsessions seemed to define them, even trap them. My mother once missed my school play because she was chasing a rare ceramic kitten 2 towns over. My father often missed dinner, hunched over a tripod or bent under the red glow of his darkroom light. My sister, when she wasn't buried in her ticket stubs, seemed more invested in preserving the past than living in the present. Their collections weren't just hobbies. They were identities, consuming and isolating them. When my mother passed last year, the family house, a sprawling Victorian with gingerbread trim and a wild, overgrown garden, became mine. My father had died years ago, and my sister had moved overseas, leaving me the sole heir to their legacy. It wasn't just the house. It was the collections. I didn't want the responsibility, but there was no avoiding it. I spent weeks cleaning, sorting, cataloging. The house felt alive, as though it had been waiting for someone to pay attention to it. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old pipes. It all seemed deliberate, like the house was breathing along with me. The porcelain cats stared down at me from their shelves, their unblinking eyes tracking my every move. My father's cameras sat in neat rows, their lenses catching and reflecting the faintest light, giving the impression they were watching. There was one part of the house I avoided, the dining room cabinet. It had always been locked, and as a kid I assumed it held the good china, the kind reserved for guests we never had. But as I sifted through the clutter, I found a key taped to the underside of a dining chair. My curiosity got the better of me. The cabinet didn't hold plates. It held jars. Dozens of glass jars, each meticulously labeled in neat, familiar handwriting. My mother's handwriting, the same looping script that adorned every porcelain cat's base. Each jar was filled with a fine, grayish dust that shimmered faintly when it caught the light. I picked one up at random. The name on the label didn't ring a bell. At first I assumed it was another of my mother's peculiar collections, a relic of her obsessive tendencies. But something about the jars unsettled me. I couldn't quite explain it, but the weight of the jar in my hand felt wrong, as though it were heavier than it should have been for its size. That night I dreamed of my mother. She stood in the dining room, her back to me, her hands busy arranging jars on the table. When I called her name, she turned, but her face was blurred as though smudged with an eraser. She pointed to the cabinet, and when I woke, the image of her outstretched hand lingered in my mind like a stain. The next morning, there was a jar on the dining table that hadn't been there the night before. I was sure I had locked the cabinet. I double-checked it, inspected the jars, counted them. Nothing seemed out of place. I told myself I must have missed it during my inventory, but the same thing happened the next night and then a week later. Each of those mornings a new jar appeared on the table, each labeled with a name I didn't recognize. I couldn't shake the feeling that the jars were important. They felt alive in some way, humming faintly in the back of my mind whenever I was near them. Their presence was heavy, oppressive, as though the air around them had thickened. The breaking point came when I started cross-referencing the names with local history. Each name belonged to someone who had gone missing in the area over the past 40 years. My family wasn't just collecting objects. They were collecting people. That night I decided to confront whatever, or whoever, was responsible. I set up a chair in the corner of the dining room, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my growing paranoia. The house seemed to hold its breath as the hours crawled by. The faintest sounds, floorboards settling, the hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified, each one setting my nerves on edge. At 3:15 a.m., the air turned cold. My breath fogged in front of me, and a faint smell of acrid smoke and mold wafted through the room. Then he appeared. The man stepped out from the shadows, impossibly tall, his disintegrating burgundy suit clinging to his skeletal frame. His face was pale, waxy, as though it had been sculpted from candle wax and left too close to a flame. His eyes glinted like polished obsidian, bottomless and unreadable. He moved with a deliberate grace, placing a jar on the table with a kind of reverence. "You're not supposed to watch," he said, his voice smooth and unhurried like the creak of a slowly opening door. I gripped the flashlight tighter. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The collector, of course." "What are you collecting?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He didn't respond. Instead, he pointed to the cabinet. "Keep them safe," he said. Then he was gone, melting back into the shadows as though he had never been there at all. In the days that followed, I tried to leave. I packed my bags, tried to call my sister, even attempted to list the house online. But every attempt was thwarted. The car wouldn't start. The phone wouldn't dial. Emails failed to send. Local realtors refused to even look at the property. The house had trapped me. The jars kept appearing, and the names grew familiar. A neighbor. The clerk from the grocery store, a childhood friend I hadn't seen in years. Each one a silent accusation, a reminder of how small and interconnected my world had become. I wanted to hate the jars, to smash them and scatter their dust, free the souls they held. But something stopped me. The jars felt sacred, important, as though destroying them would unravel something far greater than I could comprehend. Then I found the 2 jars hidden at the very back of the cabinet. 2 jars, my parents' names. The sight of them shattered something inside me. Their collections, their obsessions, they hadn't been harmless quirks. They had been symptoms of something darker, something that had consumed them completely. This morning I found a new jar on the table. It didn't have a name, just a blank label and a pen beside it. I think it's my turn. All of this started when a friend of mine, John, suggested we go up north to a large lake in Minnesota to do some ice fishing. Neither of us were new to ice fishing, and between us we had just about all of the newest high-end gear you could possibly need for doing something as bold as camping on a frozen lake in northern Minnesota for a week. So we went up there with high spirits and enough bait to make your local Walmart jealous. We made it to the lake early Sunday morning and drove out on the ice. Something neither of us had done before as fishermen who had only fished the relatively thin ice of more southern lakes. It was high spirits, laughter, and shitty music coming from the local radio stations all the way to our fishing spot. When I got out of the truck, the freezing air punched me in the face and my breath got sucked away into the wind with a white cloud. The weather forecast was perfect for the next week, with sub-zero nights with sun and 20s in the day. We immediately set to work getting our shanty, a little two-man clam style built into a sled. On the ice, holes drilled and baits tied. We were sitting on 30 feet of water, and little dots bobbed just off the bottom on the fish finder screen. We dropped our baits into the inky black water beneath us, and there seemed to be no force on earth that could kill our joy as, within seconds, 2 of those dots flew off the bottom and slammed into our baits. For the first couple of days, everything was going great. We were catching plenty of fish, the ice shanties stayed warm, and we were having an amazing time taking a break from the world. It wasn't until the 3rd day that shit hit the fan. We had only checked the weather before going out, and as I mentioned, it looked perfect, so it caught us off guard when it got cold. Really cold. That would have been fine if the wind hadn't picked up to the point that the canvas on the shanty whipped and snapped violently. The once pleasantly warm air inside it was wicked away, faster than our propane heaters could produce it, and going outside risked getting frostbite in minutes. Beneath us, the ice groaned and cracked as a rapid ice formation and movement from the wind strained it. I had grown quite accustomed to the sound of ice formation, but this was something completely different. It was like a constant thunder beneath our feet. As things started getting bad, every so often John would get up to do something. He repeatedly opened the blind on the window, retrieved his keys from his pocket and checked them, changed lures, and even checked the weather on his phone even though we had no cell service. It was clear he was getting antsy about the inclement weather and wanted to be anywhere but on the lake. I said something before he did. "Hey, do you want to pack it up and head in until this all blows over?" He began reeling in his bait before responding, "Yeah, I'm worried we're gonna freeze to death out here, man." "I hear you. Go get the truck started. I'll start to get everything packed up here." John wasted no time getting out of the tent and sprinting for the truck. I was disconnecting the wires to the fish finder when I heard it barely chug to life. Amidst the din of the truck rumbling, ice cracking, and wind, there was a new noise. It caught my ear as I set the fish finder in the sled, and I stopped moving to listen. It was a faint crinkling noise, like someone was eating a bag of chips outside the shanty. Then, with a gust of wind that bent the support poles of the shanty, a snap. My stomach lurched as unexpected movement startled me. Ice flew past the opening in the floor where our fishing holes had once been. In my shock, it took me a couple seconds to realize what had happened. The metal stake securing the shanty had broken free of the ice, and I was now gliding across the smooth ice of the lake at blistering speeds. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing that seemed rational at the time. I pressed boots into the ice to try to use them as brakes. The metal crampons on my boots dug into the ice and stopped dead. In an instant, I was slammed to the ground with such force that I momentarily blacked out. I came to an instant later, tangled in the base of the tent, getting dragged along with it. In a panicked daze, I fought against the fabric, tearing at it like an animal in a cage. Eventually, it let me go and I came sliding to a stop. I looked up and immediately my eyes teared up from the cold and wind. Through tears, I could see the truck's headlights in the distance. Shakily, I stood and waved my arms in the air, trying to signal where I was. John saw me and began driving towards me. He was only about 100 feet away when I heard a boom like lightning striking right in front of me, and the ice shifted violently. I was knocked off balance and fell to my knees. I watched as the ice beneath the truck buckled, plunging downwards faster than it could fall, and a geyser of water and ice shot up from below. The headlights of the truck went out and it plunged into the water. I got up and ran towards my friend trapped inside. I could just barely see him pounding on the glass of the side window in a desperate attempt to escape. The truck sank quickly, diving headfirst into the unforgiving waters. By the time I reached the water's edge, it was gone, not a trace of it or my friend anywhere to be seen. I fell asleep there by the water. If I'm being honest, I almost hoped I would freeze to death there in my sleep. Unfortunately, I didn't. I woke up the next day feeling numb and hungry. A huge pile of snow had built up on my back against the wind, protecting me against the worst of the onslaught. It was softly snowing with no wind. and the place in front of me that had once been water was replaced with ice as if nothing had happened. I had nothing, not even my phone that was in the sled that blew away. The only thing I still had were my clothes and my meager survival skills. I knew I needed to get off this lake as fast as possible. There was nothing to eat out here, and eating snow would only make me colder. Looking around made everything that much more bleak. The snow was a perfect sheet of white, and the white sky merged into it seamlessly. There was no telling where the sun was in the sky, and thus no way of knowing where to go. I chose a direction and started walking, my aching body protesting with every step. After walking for a while, I stopped seeing the snow. Everything in my mind had become a uniform white. Only my balance kept me upright and moving. Now and again, colorful shapes flitted into the edges of my vision and disappeared. Oddly, they didn't bother me. Through the snow of my own, likely concussed mind, a word popped out. Ganzfeld. I had taken a psychology class in college and learned about it. The Ganzfeld effect, when in the presence of a uniform color and sound, your brain will compensate with hallucinations. I saw a deer run through the emptiness, a voice whispered at me to follow, a dog barked, a truck engine rumbled, and its hood was visible above the snow. All of it was completely and utterly fabricated by my mind. That's what I thought was the case too when the shape of an ice shanty faded into existence at the edge of my vision. It was a wooden hut that didn't look all that dissimilar to an outhouse. It was dead silent as I approached, and no smoke came out of its pipe. When I got near it, I shouted out, "Hey, is anyone there?" There was a shuffling inside, and a man came out wearing a heavy coat and snow pants. "Ah, hello there. What are you doing all the way out here with a storm like that last night?" I thought about telling him everything, but instead I settled with, "My ice shanty blew away. I'm not sure where I am." "Well, that sure does sound like a predicament. Why don't you come in and warm up?" I took his offer and followed him inside. It was only marginally warmer than the outside. Certainly not above freezing, but it was better than nothing. The man grabbed a hunk of wood and threw it into the stove, lighting it with a match. "You want some fish? I got a good walleye I caught today." I hadn't eaten for well over a day at that point, and I would have eaten rocks if it meant I could fill my stomach. Eating fish would be a dream come true. "That sounds delicious, thank you." He cut fillets off a nice walleye sitting dead in some water and cooked them on the stove. He handed both of them to me, and I ate them ravenously. By the time I was done, the light coming through the small window above the stove had dimmed, and sleepiness threatened to overtake me. The man noticed and said, "You can stay here tonight if you want. It's far too risky traveling alone at night. Tomorrow I'll get you headed the right direction." I thanked him and laid down on the floor next to the ice, falling asleep almost immediately. I woke up to the feeling of being dragged through the snow. I opened my eyes to darkness. It was just bright enough to see the silhouette of the man who had let me into his hut, dragging me by my feet. My hands were tied behind my back, and in my mouth was a gag. I wasn't dead yet, but I couldn't struggle as long as he was holding on to me, so I stayed still and watched him through slitted eyes. We came to a stop in a cleared area of snow. He let go of my feet and walked a few feet away, inspecting something that I couldn't see. Slowly, I shifted my body to get a look at what it was. It was a massive hole in the ice, some 6 feet by 3 feet, with a pile of thick blocks of ice off to the side. Sitting on top of those was the culprit, a gas-powered chainsaw. The man picked up something out of the snow and set it next to the hole. He fiddled with it for a bit, and a flame lit up the darkness. He stood above the burning log and watched it grow. As he did, I noticed something odd, a minute detail that I hadn't picked up on when I had met him, but in the moment seemed as clear as day. When he breathed, nothing came out. As I watched, my own breath billowed out of my nose into the frigid air, but not even a wisp of vapor came from the man. Silently, I began moving my wrists to try to shake off the twine handcuffs. They were done over my gloves, and I slipped them off with very little effort. The ankle bindings would take much more work. I stealthily moved to bring my feet to my hands when the man whipped his head around to look at me. "Well, look who's finally awake. I didn't want you sleeping through this next part." I tried kicking myself away, but he walked over and grabbed me like it was nothing, dragging me over to the hole. With little fanfare, he pushed me into the water. The shock of the ice-cold water made my vision swim, and I gasped, the gag fortunately preventing most of the water from entering my lungs. I kicked and struggled to stay above water as the man, humming to himself, grabbed a block of ice and dropped it back in the water. He wasn't just going to let me freeze to death, but worse yet, freeze me under the ice to drown. My mind ran with ideas and one caught. I stopped moving and allowed myself to sink. Grabbing the rope around my ankles, I undid it and kicked myself free. The second block had already been dropped in. Using all of my quickly dwindling strength, I launched out of the water and grabbed the man's leg as he grabbed an ice block. I pulled with all my strength, and he wordlessly plunged into the water with me. Twisting my body, I pushed my crampons into his legs and used him as a board to launch myself out of the hole. By some miracle, it worked. I flopped my way onto the safe ice and willed my body to sprint, following the trail left by my body as the man had dragged it. Looking back, I watched as the man calmly pulled himself out of the hole and sat by the fire. I reached the man's hut and immediately stripped my soaked clothes. Rummaging through the man's stuff, I was able to procure a coat, pants, and gloves. It wasn't warmer than my other stuff, but it would have to do. I ran far, far away from that hut. When the sun came up in the morning, I was once again completely alone on a pristine plain of snow. I could talk about the countless hallucinations over those next days, or the way my body got weaker and weaker from lack of food. But it was the water that nearly killed me. I was cold. The snow that I shoved in my mouth by the handful was far, far colder. I was only physically able to be warm enough to eat some snow every several minutes or so. And when I did, often I had to spit it out without getting hardly any water because my mouth froze. Combined with my excessive walking, this led to me being extremely dehydrated. Salvation came in the form of a tripping hazard. One night as I walked through near pitch-black darkness, my boot collided with something hard beneath the snow. Excavating it, I found that I had come across an abandoned handheld ice auger. I couldn't see it, but tracing my finger along the blades told me that it would cut ice. I was ecstatic. Feeling energy unlike I had in days, I stood and began drilling my way through the ice. The sound of metal shaving ice filled the air in the darkness. My arms burned from the effort of cranking the auger deeper and deeper into the ice. I was beginning to have to bend over to keep going when the feeling of the ice changed. It felt wrong. Now and again the auger would get stuck on something and I would have to reverse it and attack again. With a final push, the ice suddenly gave and I fell flat on my face as my auger plunged into liquid water. I yanked it out and put my mouth to the hole, greedily drinking the disgusting lake water. The water tasted metallic. It was just barely noticeable, and I certainly didn't care given how thirsty I was. Once I drank my fill, I looked to the horizon to see the very edge of twilight illuminating the clouds, providing an obvious edge to where the ground met the sky. As it got brighter, I could see nothing besides the perfect plain of snow I had grown accustomed to, a blue auger, and the hole it had drilled in the ice. It wasn't the hole that caught my attention, though, it was what was around it. The ice shavings surrounding it were red with flecks of black. My heart jumped with fear, but I rationalized it. Surely it must be something natural, maybe some algae that froze into the ice. I crawled back to the hole and looked in it, feet of ice and then something else. I began clearing the snow away around the hole. I could see a shape below the ice, but the snow that stuck to its surface wouldn't let me get a clear view. Taking off my gloves, I stuck my hands into the water and cupped them together. I splashed water over the ice, and it immediately became crystal clear. There, frozen in the ice, was John with a hole drilled right through his chest, his face contorted in anguish, as if my auger was the reason he had died. I felt sick. The water I had just drank threatened to come back up, but with some difficulty I forced it down. I collapsed to the ground and curled up, sobbing. Nearly a week's worth of suffering finally bubbling over. I stayed that way for quite a while until the sun was high in the sky. The sun. I realized that for the first time, unfiltered sunlight was reaching me. I looked up and found that the sky had cleared, and on the very horizon I could see a black line of trees. I stood and took one last look toward John before finally making my way back to land. I can't say it was much better once I got back there. Hospitals, amputations, all sorts. I lost all my toes, my right pinky and ring finger, and the tip of my nose. There were a lot of other complications as well that left me with a lengthy hospital stay and a massive bill. I've regained my ability to walk and I've fallen back into a normal life, besides the weekly therapy sessions. It's been a year since then. I'm only writing this story now because I got a knock on the door today. It was John, wearing a coat and snow pants. In the center of his chest, the coat seemed to cave in. He smiled warmly at me and said, "Hey man, long time no see, want to do some ice fishing?" Despite the cold, no vapor left his mouth. When I finished some work at the college campus, I wasn't surprised to see that it was well past 11 p.m. It was late, and I needed to head home to get some rest for tomorrow. With tired feet, I walked down the hall to the elevator on the north side of the campus. As I made my way to the elevator, I passed the main stairs, which were currently under repair after a project went wrong. Didn't get much of the details, but I heard that apparently some of the students were working on a project and made a miscalculation, which then created a hole down to the next floor. Luckily enough, the people who were caught up in it only came out with minor injuries, and they were back on campus within the next few days. Turning the corner, the elevator came into view. A piece of paper was stuck onto it by a single piece of tape, and as I got closer, I was able to make it out. Out of order, please use the emergency stairs or the other elevator. Just my luck. After some thought, I decided that taking the stairs would be much quicker, as the only other elevator was on the other side of the building. With a heavy sigh, I turned the handle and let the door slam shut behind me, realizing my mistake too late. For some reason, the lights didn't turn on. They were automatic lights and should have turned on the moment the door opened, or when I took the first few steps inside, but none of the lights turned on. I was already here and had my phone with me with more than enough battery in it to light the path in front of me as I would make my way down to the ground floor. Step, step, step. The sound of my shoes hitting the stone beneath echoed loudly throughout the stairwell, the only sound that could be heard in here. Step, step, step. I made it past the second floor and soon as well past the first, and finally I made it to the... What? I rubbed my eyes to make sure I was seeing things clearly. After all, I haven't been sleeping well for the past few days, so I could be seeing things, but right before me, as bright as the phone torch could show me, I was at the door to the third floor. Did I make a mistake, I thought to myself, possibly imagining walking down the stairs without even doing so. I looked around and saw the stairs that I supposedly came from and the stairs that led downwards to what could only be the second floor. Maybe I somehow imagined walking down those steps. So I walked down the stairs again, going past the second, then the first, and finally made it to the third floor. One more time, from third floor to second floor to first floor, and first floor to third floor. Going down the stairs was no longer an option, so I tried going up the stairs to see if I could make it to the rooftop. Same problem. I tried opening one of the 3 doors and it led me to an identical staircase. I can't stay here. I need to get out. I need to get out now. My phone's battery is running low. Soon I'll be trapped here alone in the darkness. I've been walking in here for probably hours, and seeing how things are going, will most likely never get out. With no reception to call for help or even so goodbye, all I could do was write on here to prove what had happened to me and tell my story. My name is Nathan, and there are people moving around on the other side of my bedroom wall, and I don't know what to do. It started a couple weeks ago when I was laying in my bed trying to sleep when I heard something move around. It was small and barely audible, maybe a mouse or a cat or something. All the houses in my development have really thin walls, so it wasn't uncommon to hear things moving around outside, especially at night. It continued for a couple minutes, and I didn't think much of it. Went to sleep soon after it stopped. I didn't hear anything for a day or two after that. The next time I heard something was at bedtime again. It was late, and by the time I got my bed out, my room is tiny, so I save on space with a folding mat I sleep on. I was ready to pass out. My eyes were heavy and consciousness was failing me. Just before I was out, I heard it for a second time. More shuffling. Again, I didn't really think too much of it, but I've always been a little paranoid, so I had to wait for it to stop before my body would let me sleep. This time was different. After a couple minutes of shuffling, I heard a distinct thump. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded just like footsteps would coming from another room with hardwood flooring. This roused me because it came from the same wall as the last noise the day before. An external wall. There's nothing past that wall except for 30 feet of grass before you hit the neighbor's shed, and another 20 until the neighbor's house. What the heat, I muttered under my breath. Immediately after the words left my mouth, the noise stopped. I sat there staring at the wall with my heart pounding. A few minutes passed, which felt like an eternity to my poor heart, and nothing happened. No more noises. After my heart settled down, I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. How could there be footsteps in a room that didn't exist? It was late and I was exhausted. I must have been imagining things. Like when you're drifting asleep and imagine falling and jolt awake. Hell, it could have even been someone banging on something in another house. It still bothered me, though. It sounded so close. It still bothered me the next morning, and I couldn't quite shake that feeling, so before I went to work, I went around the house to look over the area on the other side of my bedroom. You'll never believe what I found. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. After a couple minutes of looking and some weird glances from dog walkers on the sidewalk out front, I couldn't help but laugh a little. "You're losing it, Nate," I scolded myself with an embarrassed smile as I jumped in my car and drove to work. A few boring days later, while I was waiting for a delivery to take, I'm a pizza delivery guy, I recalled the odd events in the week earlier. Yet again, a sense of cringe hit me and I couldn't do anything but laugh at myself. I texted my girlfriend, JJ, and told her about it. She laughed with me and teased me about it. She told me I should even write a spooky story about it. I have no idea what direction to even take something like that. Maybe the footsteps are some sort of people from a parallel universe and the barrier between our universe and theirs is wearing thin in that spot. Or maybe you could make it like a psychosis thing or ghosts or... I hate stopping her when she's excited, but I have no idea how to even write or format stories. Truth be told, I'm not even interested in writing. I'm just keeping this journal so I don't go completely stir crazy in my own head. It's been 2 weeks since the first time I heard the noise, and JJ keeps bugging me to write a short story about them. She says it would be good for me to take up writing instead of just going to work and gaming when I get home. You need to get out of your shell. I know you don't like people, so I'm not going to drag you out of the house, but you need to do something else to exercise that brain of yours. She's always looking out for me, wanting me to be the best version of myself I can be. It's annoying, but she's got a point, and I can't help but want to do better for her. Tomorrow I'll try writing something, but don't be disappointed when it doesn't turn out any good. I texted her. I would have paid good money to see how thrilled she was, but I couldn't help but smile when her flood of excited texts came streaming in on my phone. I wasn't nearly as excited as she was, but that was a problem for tomorrow. I still have my games tonight. I got my bed out and put on some soft white noise. A recommendation from JJ. I was thinking about the story I had reluctantly agreed to write. Where do I start? Where do I take it? I could make it a ghost story. I've always liked those. But I live in a new development, and to my knowledge, this wasn't some sort of ancient Indian burial ground. I guess I didn't need to make it about my house in particular, and ghost stories are getting kind of stale. I don't know. That's tomorrow's dilemma. I should get some sleep. I laid there, eyes sealed shut, trying to stop thinking about the story and its possibilities and just sleep. Just as I turned over and got comfortable, I heard it again. A booming thud followed by 2 distinct sets of footsteps. I was already up, crouched low, and eyes locked on the bare wall. This was real. I wasn't crazy. The footsteps sounded like they were about 15 feet away, and they were getting closer. They were approaching the wall. I tried to stand and run, but my legs were jelly, 10 feet away. In a desperate panic, I grabbed the knife off my dinner plate and clutched it as tight as a rock climber gripping the cliffside in a thunderstorm. 5 feet. My whole body was shaking. My knuckles were white as marble around the hilt of the knife. A couple feet. The only thing between them and I was a paper-thin wall that the builders cut corners on. Silence. There was no sound except for my heart exploding in my ears. Minutes, hours, days could have passed in that silence, and I wouldn't have known. Finally, with a shock to my senses, there was a deafening scratching noise. In a brief second of terror, I thought they were scratching through the wall until the noise started getting quieter, smaller. They were dragging something away from the wall, like 2 kids dragging the dining table across the room. After a couple minutes of this, the noises disappeared into the silent night, and I was left there staring at the wall until the sun came up. There are people making noises on the other side of my wall, and I don't know what to do. Hi, my name's Kevin. Now I know you're probably thinking, another sob story. Another person trying to justify the mess they've made of their life. But I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not here to make excuses. This is just me telling you how things went down, how I ended up here. It's a long story, so bear with me. I've struggled with mental health for years. It's a battle, every single day. It wasn't always this way, but somewhere along the line, life kicked me down, and I didn't know how to get back up. Anxiety, depression, addiction, I was drowning in it. And the drugs? They were just a quick way out, a way to forget. I had nothing else going for me, and I didn't really care. Every morning felt like a fight to even get out of bed. I was living with my grandmother at the time, though. She was the only one left who really cared about me. I didn't want to disappoint her. She was getting older, and I knew I had to make a change, for her, for me. I wanted to get clean, to do better, so I started working 2 jobs, a dishwasher at a greasy restaurant and a cleaner at a factory. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was enough to keep my mind occupied, to keep the drugs at bay for a while. The days blurred together, just work, eat, sleep, repeat. That's all I knew. But then things started to get weird. Real weird. One day I was walking down the street trying to get to my second job at the factory when an old man approached me. I didn't see him coming. He just appeared, like he had been standing in the shadows waiting for me. His clothes were shabby, worn out like he had been wearing them for years. His face was pale like he hadn't seen sunlight in months, maybe longer. There was something about him, something off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "Excuse me, son," he said in a rasping voice, like the words had to fight their way out. "You looking for work?" I was confused at first. I didn't know this guy. Hell, I didn't even know if he was real, but I was tired of the same old routine. And to be honest, the idea of a change, any kind of change, sounded good. Plus money. Who turns that down? "Sure," I said, probably sounding desperate, but I didn't care. I needed a break, something to break the monotony of my life. "What kind of work are we talking about?" The old man's eyes lit up and his cracked lips curled into a smile. It wasn't a warm smile, it was strange, almost knowing, like he was aware of something I wasn't. "I run a business, son. It's a unique one. You'd be working for me in a special capacity. Something different, something that pays well." I didn't ask what it was. I was too tired to care, too worn out from life to question anything. I just wanted to make money, and this old man seemed to know how to get it. "I'm interested," I said, almost too quickly. But the old man didn't seem surprised. He just nodded as if he expected me to say that. "You meet me tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp. Don't be late," he ordered, before shuffling off into the shadows. I thought about walking away, but something told me this wasn't just another weird encounter. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he carried himself like he knew something I didn't. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe I just wanted out of my head. Whatever it was, I followed him. The next day I showed up at the time he told me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but as soon as I walked through the door, I knew this wasn't a normal company. The place was a rundown warehouse on the edge of town, tucked away behind some old factories. Inside it was dark, cold, and smelled like rust and dust. The old man greeted me with a nod and handed me a uniform. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it felt wrong. The material was too stiff, too new for a place this rundown. "Your first task is easy," the old man said, his voice low and deliberate. "You'll be cleaning cars, but not just any cars. We have specific clients with very specific needs. You'll find out soon enough." I didn't ask what that meant. It didn't matter. I was there to work, to get paid. I had no idea that this job would spiral into something I couldn't control. I started working on the cars. At first, it was just basic cleaning, washing, waxing, detailing. But one day I got a car that was different. I should have known. The moment I laid eyes on it, I knew something was wrong. It was an old sedan covered in dust and grime, like it had been abandoned for years. I opened the door and the smell hit me. It wasn't just the stale air of a forgotten car. It was something worse, something metallic. I took a deep breath and tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing. But then I noticed something. Under the seats there was a stain, dark red, almost like dried blood. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I leaned in closer, my stomach twisting. There was something in the back seat, a body. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could tell by the shape of it. The stiff, unnatural posture. I closed the door and backed away slowly. I don't know why, but I didn't report it right away. I was too scared. But I couldn't shake the image of that body in the back seat. I had to say something, right? I had to. So, I went to the old man. "I found something strange in one of the cars," I said, my voice trembling. "There was blood in the back seat, a body, I think." The old man just looked at me with those cold, dead eyes. He didn't blink, didn't even flinch. "What body?" he asked, his voice calm, almost amused. I stared at him. "The body, the one I saw in the car, there was..." I turned around to show him, but when I reached the lot, the car was gone, just like that. It was as if it had never been there. The old man chuckled softly. "You're imagining things, Kevin. There's nothing wrong with that car. It's just a job, son. Don't overthink it." I didn't know what to think. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe it was all in my head. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, and then Jenny came into my life, my girlfriend. I know what you're thinking. How does Jenny fit into all this? Trust me, I'm getting there. But it's all connected. Nothing in this story happens without reason. And Jenny? Well, she was part of the reason everything started to fall apart. I remember the first time I saw her. It was at the restaurant where I worked. She sat at the counter every morning just like clockwork. She was beautiful in a quiet way. Smart, confident, like she didn't belong in this small town. She started talking to me, asking about my day, about my life. It wasn't long before we started spending more time together. It felt real. For once, I felt like maybe I had a shot at something different, something worth fighting for. But then came the twist. I was scrolling through the local news one night when I came across her obituary. I had to read it twice because I couldn't believe it. Jenny had been dead for weeks. Her body had been found in an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. The police thought she was missing before they discovered her. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. But how could this be? How could she be dead if I was still seeing her, talking to her, touching her? I couldn't stop shaking. There was no explanation. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake, that maybe she had a twin or something. But deep down I knew the truth. Jenny was dead, and I had no idea what was happening to me. I'll stop here for now. It gets darker from here, trust me. But if you're still with me, I'll tell you how it all spiraled out of control. So after I found out about Jenny's death, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her face. I could hear her laugh, her soft voice calling my name. But it wasn't just that. It was the feeling. The feeling that she was still with me, that she was never really gone. I couldn't explain it, but it was like she was haunting me, but in a way that felt comforting. Maybe that's what made it so disturbing. It wasn't the kind of haunting that made you afraid. It was the kind that made you question your own sanity. I wanted to believe I was just imagining things, that my mind was playing tricks on me because of everything I was going through. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And that's when it all started to spiral. I started seeing strange things that didn't make sense. It was like the world around me was changing, distorting itself in ways that made me feel like I was losing control. At work, the dishes started stacking up faster than I could wash them. It was like the sink was multiplying them. More and more plates, bowls, silverware piling up endlessly, no matter how fast I worked. I couldn't even keep up anymore. My hands shook as I scrubbed them, each plate slipping from my grip, each one breaking as it hit the floor. It was like they were mocking me, mocking my inability to keep my life together. One night I was cleaning in the factory, the hum of the machines the only sound. It was late and I was tired, so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. But I kept going. Then out of nowhere, the lights flickered and I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Exhaustion, stress, whatever. But it kept happening. Every time I turned a corner, I'd hear the footsteps, always just behind me, just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was following me. But the worst part wasn't the footsteps. It was what I saw. One night, as I was walking to the back of the factory to take out the trash, I glanced at the old machine that had been there since the building opened. It was covered in rust, but the red lights on the control panel were still glowing dimly. And there, pressed against the glass, was the face of a man. Not just any man. No, it was him. The old man who'd hired me. His eyes were wide open, staring at me through the thick glass, but he wasn't moving. He was just staring. I ran like hell, not even caring about the trash anymore, just wanting to get out. But when I looked back, the machine was empty. No face, no man. Just the blinking red lights like nothing had ever happened. I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to the old man and asked him what was going on, but he just smiled that cold, knowing smile of his. He didn't seem surprised at all. "You're seeing things, Kevin. You're letting your mind take you places it shouldn't. Don't worry. You'll get used to it. These things, they'll become part of you and you'll be just fine," he said, as though he'd said this 1,000 times before. I didn't want to believe him, but the things I was seeing, Jenny's face, the man in the machine, the voices in the dark, were starting to blend together. They weren't separate anymore. They were all one thing, something bigger, something I couldn't escape from. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything, not the work, not the voices, not even Jenny. It was like I was caught in a nightmare, trapped in a world that didn't make sense. But then it happened again. I was at the supermarket, just picking up some food for dinner. My hands were shaking as I pushed the cart down the aisles, trying to ignore the feeling that something was off. I was grabbing cans of soup when I looked up and saw him. Isaac. He was standing at the end of the aisle, staring at me with wide eyes, those familiar eyes that I'd seen in my nightmares. Isaac. The dead son of the old couple, the one I'd seen at their house, the one I thought was a ghost. He was there in the flesh, wearing the same clothes he'd been buried in. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. Was I seeing things? Was this another hallucination, or was it real? My eyes locked onto his, and I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't work. Isaac didn't move. He just stood there, smiling. A sick, twisted smile that made my blood run cold. He raised his hand, holding up a picture frame with a photograph inside. It was the same picture that had been in the old couple's house, the picture of him, smiling, as if nothing had happened. But I could see it now, the twisted, horrifying truth. The picture was cracked. The glass was shattered, and the edges were smeared with dark red, like blood. Like his blood. "Help me," I whispered, my voice breaking. But the words felt empty, like they didn't belong to me anymore. Isaac didn't speak, he just laughed. A hollow, chilling laugh that echoed through the store, sending a shiver down my spine. It was then that I realized, with a sickening clarity, that I wasn't just seeing a ghost. I wasn't imagining things. I was part of something much bigger than I could ever understand. And that's when I heard it. The voice of the old man coming from behind me as if he had been standing there the whole time. "You're doing great, Kevin," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Just keep going. You'll figure it out soon enough. You're part of the show now. It's just entertainment, son. But you're the star." And that's when everything clicked. It all came rushing in. Every odd job, every strange encounter, every horror that had haunted me, every twist in the story. It was all part of the show. I was on a TV prank show, and I had been from the very beginning. I was the one being manipulated. I was the punchline. I turned around, my blood running cold, and there he was, the host, the camera crew, the whole damn production. They were all watching me, waiting for my reaction. They had orchestrated every part of this, every single nightmare I'd lived through. The old man, Isaac, Jenny, they were all actors, and I had been their fool. I stood there frozen, as the host approached me with a microphone, grinning from ear to ear. "You've been part of the show, Kevin. The joke's on you. Thanks for playing." I didn't know what to feel anymore. My mind shattered, my sense of reality crumbling. Every moment, every pain, every feeling had been a lie. A performance for an audience that was probably laughing at me the whole time. And that's when it hit me. Everything I'd gone through, the drugs, the pain, the fear, had been for nothing. For a laugh, for entertainment. It was all a game. And I had been the joke. I'll leave it here, but if you're still with me, know that the real horror isn't the things I saw, or the things I experienced. The real horror was realizing that I had spent my whole life being manipulated. That the worst part of all of this was that I'd never had any control. Not over the jobs, not over the people I met, and certainly not over the way my life had spiraled. I wish I could tell you there's more, but that's the thing, there is no more. There's just the show. A man pulls up a bar stool next to me and beckons the bartender. "Could I get a Bloody Mary?" he says as he chuckles to himself. The bartender seems to stand still, as if frozen in place. "What the hell?" he says, laughing as if he made a particularly good pun. "I must have had a bit too much to drink tonight," I say to the man next to me. "I feel like I can't even stand up." He sighs. "I'm afraid so. Finish your drink and come with me." "You trying to fight me?" "I haven't done anything to you. I'm a pretty good fighter. I'll kill you if I have to," I tell the man. He just chuckles. "That would be preferable for the both of us. Sadly, you must come with me eventually," he says to me, almost calmly, even as I raise my fist to punch him. He slowly pushes it down with his own hand and playfully shoves me as if we've known each other for years. At least be polite before you try and kill me. Let me introduce myself. I don't know what you want, but I'm not going with you wherever you want to go. He doesn't react, just waits polite as ever, like I didn't just threaten to bash his brains in. I wait for a moment for him to say his piece, but he beckons me to speak. Fine, what's your name? He looks at me patiently, eyes unblinking, voice staying perfectly calm as if he has said this 1,000,000 times. I'm Death, and your time has come. I pause for a second, my mind stopping to compute. I'm not ready yet, I tell Death. Has no skeleton, no scythe standing by his side, just another man. He sighs. That's what they always say, trying to delay stall. I'm sure you already know it won't work. He smiles at me and taps the simple watch on his arm. The hand seems to keep still, seconds not moving. You don't understand. I still have so much to live for, so much more to do. He doesn't argue, just sits by my side, sunken eyes staring into my soul as if they have seen centuries of use. We can sit here until I must claim the life of your sun and stars as well. You mortals can never get your affairs in order. Death says to me calmly, almost comfortingly in a strange sort of way. But I need to talk with my family and there are 1,000,000 questions. Death cuts me off. I'm afraid your time is up. You will get no peace from talking with me. He says as a mother would to her child, patient, understanding, yet firm and commanding. Then just one, I plead. Go ahead. Why sit here and tell me all of this? I try hard to swallow but cannot, my throat closing in on itself. Why? I struggle to breathe. Why not simply reap my soul and leave? I try to be kind. I do not enjoy taking life any more than a mortician wants to dissect you. It is simply my job. I try not to make it too hard on you. He continues, take your drink for the road, for I shall walk with you into eternity. These are, to my knowledge, the last words of my best friend Nathan. Nathan had grown up in an extremely religious household and dedicated his life and career to focus on the study of the Bible and books related to it. I can remember in high school he'd constantly invite me to church or to Bible studies. This drive towards God carried over into his college career as well, picking a theology major and later pursuing a master's degree in divinity. I want to make a note of something I had always found interesting about Nathan's interests. I feel that many people, in the context of religion, focus on either the afterlife or whatever moral code that religion teaches. Nathan's obvious obsession, however, was with the origins, the ancient stories, the forgotten lore buried beneath centuries of doctrine. At a certain point, he became fixated on the Book of Enoch. After that, Nathan became a bit scary to be around. He would ramble to me like a madman about fallen angels, watchers as he called them, and their children. He became obsessed with the ancient world, scouring maps of the supposed locations of biblical stories, Mesopotamia, Mount Hermon, the ruins of Baalbek, muttering about how these stories weren't just allegories but recordings of real historical events. His apartment became cluttered with books, maps, and scribbled pieces of paper filled with otherworldly figures and diagrams. He barely slept, barely ate, and his eyes were always filled with this wide, frantic look, as if he had an understanding of something that no one else did. We stayed close up until after college, when he told me that the Lord was calling him to serve overseas. 7 years went by and I never heard from him. Not one letter, email, or even postcard until yesterday. I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. Surprised at how this clear scam email hadn't been sent to my spam folder, I opened it out of curiosity. A single file was attached with the message, "Don't come." Against my better judgment, I opened the file to find images of notes, the handwriting of which I recognized. It was Nathan's. Also included were a series of images. At first, these were of vast deserts, of tents, and of strangers who I assume were Nathan's friends or associates. I counted 4 men and 2 women, not including Nathan. The images honestly seemed happy at first, like someone's vacation gallery. The last few images broke this happy trend. I won't upload them as Reddit would surely ban me, but I can describe them to you. First was the mouth of a cave in the wall of a mountain. Next was a black tunnel, lit only by the headlights of the group. I could make out bizarre carvings and symbols on the walls. The third was of a large, room-like cavern. All of the members of Nathan's group were facing the same way, and I could make out a shape in the blackness. The fourth image was blurry, clearly taken while moving, but I could see the body, face, and arms of a woman, one of Nathan's friends. She was only halfway in the frame, positioned horizontally as if she were laying down, but she was far too high up to have been jumping or diving for cover. The last two photos turned my stomach, and I needed to take a break to vomit before I looked on. They were clearer than the last image. The first of the two were of the same cavern, but from a different angle. Nathan was hiding from something behind a large stone. The floor was now soaked in puddles of crimson blood. Across the room, another man who I recognized from Nathan's group was also hiding. In between them, I counted 4 broken, mangled bodies on the floor of the cave. 3 of the men and 1 of the women lay twisted and shattered against the stone and rock. One was sitting with his back against the wall of the cave, held in place by the motorcycle-sized slab of stone that had crushed his head and upper torso. I could only identify him by his shoes, which I had seen in the earlier images. Another man had been bisected along his stomach, only his top half was in frame. The woman was on the floor, her limbs bent and splintered at impossible angles, resembling a mosquito that had been hit by a fly swatter. Of the last man in the photo, only part of his head remained. It was now without a jaw, but even through the camera I could see the fear that had been in his eyes before he died. The last image was from the same position as the one before it. But now, the man across the room had abandoned his hiding spot, laying now on the floor, hands out in front of him as if begging for mercy from the figure in front of him. I could only see one massive, hairy leg connected to an equally large foot. Its nails were yellow and long, but other than its sheer size, it was unmistakably human. The final thing I noticed in the image was barely noticeable in the corner of the frame, a finger the length of a full-grown man, angled as if the rest of the hand were reaching for Nathan. I closed the file and once again saw what I now understood to be the final words of my best friend. Don't come. Never thought I'd have a reason to share this story online. I always chalked it up to an overactive imagination, but after falling down a rabbit hole of Appalachian folklore, I felt the need to finally put it into words. I grew up in Nashville, and every time my parents drove us to the Smokies to visit family, it felt like Christmas. If you've never been to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, imagine the Las Vegas Strip, if it were designed for middle-class families. A long stretch of road lined with go-karts, water parks, and over-the-top dinner shows that probably haven't aged as well as I remember them. All of this is to say that when my parents told me we were moving there, I was ecstatic. Looking back, our reason for moving wasn't as happy as I would have liked. It was 2009, and like a lot of families back then, we were struggling. My parents tried to downplay it, but even at 12, I could tell things weren't right. When my aunt and uncle offered us a place to stay, it wasn't framed as a last resort, but that's exactly what it was. Their cabin wasn't in Pigeon Forge, not really. It was tucked away in the woods between there and Gatlinburg, a good 15-minute drive from the neon lights and tourist traps. I didn't realize it at the time, but my parents weren't thrilled about the move. I was too caught up in my daydreams of roller coasters and water slides to notice the tension in their voices. I remember the disappointment sinking in as we drove deeper into the mountains, the bright lights of Pigeon Forge fading behind us. I'd been so sure we'd be staying near all the fun stuff, somewhere with bumper cars and arcade games right down the road. But instead, we kept winding further into the woods, the trees growing thicker and the roads narrower. "Alex, you're going to love it," my dad said from the driver's seat, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "It's quiet, peaceful. Think of it as an adventure." I forced a smile, but the excitement I'd been carrying all week started to feel heavy in my chest. Quiet wasn't what I wanted. Peaceful wasn't either. "I just thought we'd be closer to all the fun stuff," I said, glancing out the window at the endless forest. "We're in the middle of nowhere." "Oh, don't be so negative," Mom chimed in, twisting to look at me from the passenger seat. "Once we get settled in, we might take you to Dollywood this weekend. How does that sound?" "Dollywood's pretty pricey," Dad said with a wince, but when he saw my face fall, he quickly added, but we can see about getting some tickets." That was enough to pull me out of my slump. "Really?" I asked, sitting up straighter. Mom smiled at me, though her voice softened. "Really? We'll figure it out. Just give this place a chance, okay?" I nodded, but as we turned onto a bumpy gravel road and the cabin came into view, small, worn, and tucked deep in the trees, I still couldn't shake the feeling that quiet and peaceful were just fancy words for lonely. As we pulled into the driveway, the cabin finally came into view, nestled between the towering trees like it had been hidden there on purpose. It wasn't as big as I'd imagined, a single story with a wraparound porch and a roof that looked a little too weathered. But Aunt Laura was already on the porch, waving like she hadn't seen family in years. "There's my favorite niece," she called as we climbed out of the car. I smiled, even though I was her only niece, and let her pull me into a hug that smelled like lavender and fresh bread. "It's so good to see you, Alex," she said warmly, brushing a strand of my hair behind my ear. "You've grown so much since the last time I saw you." I didn't remember ever meeting her before, but I just nodded politely and let her lead me up the porch steps. "Come on, let me show you to your room. I fixed up the guest bedroom for you. Thought you might like the one with the window overlooking the woods." Inside, the cabin felt smaller than it looked. Cozy, I guess, if I was being generous. The living room opened straight into the kitchen, with mismatched furniture and a faint smell of wood smoke hanging in the air. Aunt Laura led me down a short hallway and pushed open a door to reveal a small room with a twin bed, a nightstand, and a window framed by floral curtains. "It's not much," she said, patting my shoulder, "but I figured you'd want a little space to yourself." "It's nice," I said, dropping my backpack onto the bed. The truth was, it felt cramped, like the walls were leaning in, but the view out the window was kind of pretty. Trees stretched out as far as I could see, their tops swaying gently in the wind. "You'll get used to it," she added with a wink before stepping back toward the door. "Why don't you unpack a little and settle in? Dinner'll be ready soon." I nodded, glancing back out the window. The woods seemed so still, but something about them felt alive, like they were waiting for something. Uncle Frank lumbered into the house, his boots scuffing against the wooden floor, a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. He pulled off his cap and let out a sigh, shaking his head as he set the rifle down by the door. "Well, Rob, welcome to the good life," he said, clapping my dad on the back with a grin. "Bet you're missing all that city traffic already." Dad chuckled, setting down his duffel bag. "Yeah, something like that." Frank smirked, but the expression didn't last long. "Didn't have much luck out there today. Thought I had a buck lined up, but he took off before I could get a shot. Guess even the deer know I'm losing my touch." Aunt Laura rolled her eyes, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Maybe they're just smarter than you give 'em credit for. Or maybe Frank's just dumber than we thought." Mom chimed in, grinning as she and Laura shared a laugh. Dad just gave a tight smile, glancing at me. We exchanged an awkward look, both unsure whether to laugh or just let it pass. Dinner that night was quieter than I expected. Aunt Laura and Mom chatted about recipes and old family memories while Uncle Frank teased Dad between bites of stew. I mostly picked at my food, still trying to adjust to the small, cozy space and the eerie stillness outside. Every now and then I caught my mom glancing at me like she was checking to see if I was okay. I forced a smile each time, even though my stomach felt too tight to eat much. After dinner, I helped Aunt Laura clear the table, and Mom and Dad stepped outside for some air. The house felt smaller with just me, Aunt Laura and Uncle Frank sitting around, the distant hum of crickets seeping through the walls. That's when there was a sharp knock at the door. "Come on in, Caleb," Aunt Laura called, not even looking up from the plate she was drying. The door creaked open, and a boy about my age stepped inside, pushing his shaggy brown hair out of his face with one hand, while awkwardly fumbling with a rolled-up newspaper in the other. His jeans were streaked with dirt, and his sneakers looked like they'd been through one too many puddles. "Got your paper," he announced, a little too loudly, as he tossed it onto the counter. It unrolled halfway and slid onto the floor, and he froze, looking at it for a second too long before Aunt Laura pointed it out with a laugh. "Thanks, Caleb, but you're supposed to deliver it to the counter, not the floor," she teased. "Oh, right." He stooped down quickly, scooping it up and slapping it onto the counter with a sheepish grin. Here you go. Perfect delivery." "That's more like it," she said, smiling as she turned toward me. "Come meet my niece, Alex. She just got here today." Caleb straightened up, shoving his hands into his pockets and rocking on his heels. His eyes darted toward me, but he didn't hold eye contact for long. Hey, I'm Caleb. I live down the road. Well, not like right down the road, it's kind of far, but I bike here sometimes, so it's not that far." His words tumbled out in a rush, and he scratched the back of his neck as his voice trailed off. "Hi," I said, trying not to laugh at his rambling. You're about the same age, Aunt Laura chimed in. Maybe Caleb can show you around sometime. Yeah, he said quickly, his face brightening. I mean, if you want, there's this cool spot with rocks you can climb and a stream and this one tree that's like super big. You'd probably like it. He finished with an awkward, toothy grin. That sounds fun, I said, turning to Aunt Laura. Is it okay to go now? She looked surprised for a moment but smiled warmly. If Caleb's up for it, just don't wander too far. It's getting dark. Yeah, totally, Caleb said, already inching toward the door. We'll just check out the stream real quick. It's close, like super close. You'll love it. I glanced at Aunt Laura for confirmation, and when she nodded, I grabbed my jacket and followed Caleb outside. I wasn't sure if this was a good idea, but the thought of finally doing something other than sitting around the cabin was too tempting to pass up. So you moved in with Mrs. Laura and Mr. Frank. That's cool. They're nice. Dad has me bring the paper and their mail to them sometimes since the delivery guy won't go this far. I didn't know they had a niece. Where are you from? I haven't seen you here before. Do you like it here? Caleb rattled off without a breath, barely giving me a second to respond. I blinked, trying to process the rapid-fire questions. Nashville, I answered, deciding to tackle the easiest one first. And we just got here today, so I haven't really had time to... Oh, Nashville, that's a big city, right? He interrupted, his voice buzzing with curiosity. I've never been, but I bet it's crazy loud. Are there, like, huge buildings everywhere and, like, famous people walking around? Oh, have you ever met Dolly Parton? I couldn't help but laugh a little at that. No, I've never met Dolly Parton. Dang, that'd be cool, though. Caleb kicked a rock off the path, shoving his hands into his pockets. So do you like it here so far? I hesitated, glancing around at the trees stretching endlessly in every direction. The air smelled fresh, like damp earth and pine, and the only sounds were the crunch of our footsteps and the distant hum of crickets. It was different, that was for sure. It's quiet, I finally said. Caleb grinned. Yeah, you get used to it. Well, except at night. Sometimes it's really quiet, too quiet, but that's normal. I frowned. Too quiet? He waved a hand. Yeah, you know, like when the crickets just stop all of a sudden, and it's just nothing. Kinda creepy, but it's whatever. He said it like it was no big deal, but something about the way he kicked another rock down the path made me wonder if he believed that. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and kept walking. Yeah, it's kinda cool, Caleb said, his tone shifting just slightly. When it gets real quiet, you can hear the music. I stopped mid-step looking at him. Music? He nodded, kicking another rock lazily down the dirt path. Yeah, it comes from the woods. You gotta listen real close, though. It doesn't happen all the time, just... sometimes, you know? Like late at night or early in the morning when everything else is real still. A weird chill ran through me, even though the air was warm. What kind of music? Caleb shrugged, like he hadn't just said something that sounded straight out of a ghost story. Dunno. It's kinda like a violin, but not really. It's hard to explain. Sometimes it's real soft, like it's far away, and sometimes it's closer. But if you try to find it, it stops. I let out a nervous laugh, even though I wasn't sure why. You're messing with me. I swear I'm not, he said, grinning but still serious. I've heard it since I was little. My dad says it's just the wind, but wind don't play music. That last part stuck with me. Wind don't play music. I glanced at the woods around us, darkening as the sun dipped lower behind the hills. The trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering in the breeze. There was nothing unusual, nothing strange, but for the first time since I'd arrived, I really listened. We arrived at the creek. It was quiet, but nothing like the eerie silence he'd described. The water rushed gently over the rocks, its steady trickle filling the air. Crickets had started chirping softly, their song blending with the distant hum of cicadas as the sun dipped lower behind the mountains. The whole scene felt calm, still, almost like something out of a painting. It was nice, peaceful. Have you ever had a kiss? Caleb asked, shattering the moment completely. I blinked, turning to him. What? A kiss, he repeated as if I hadn't heard him the first time. Like, you know, with another person. I stared at him, unsure whether to be confused, horrified, or just walk away. No? Caleb nodded like he was thinking really hard about it. Me neither. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Okay? He kicked at a loose pebble near the water's edge. I just figured we're about the same age, and some kids at school have done it, so I was curious. I shifted uncomfortably. I don't really know you like that. Caleb's eyes widened like he just realized how weird the conversation had gotten. Oh no, I wasn't. I didn't mean we should. He groaned, rubbing his hands over his face. That came out super weird, didn't it? I nodded. Yeah, it did. Crap, okay. Pretend I didn't say anything, he said quickly, waving his hands like he could erase the last 30 seconds. I have a habit of saying dumb stuff when it's too quiet. I smirked despite myself. Notice that? Suddenly it got quiet. The change was so subtle at first that I almost didn't notice it. 1 second, the forest was alive with sound, and the next, it was slipping away piece by piece. The crickets softened, their chirps fading into nothing. The cicadas followed, like someone was slowly turning the volume down on the entire woods. Even the creek, the water right in front of me, seemed to hush, its steady rush over the rocks dulling to an eerie, almost unnatural quiet. Caleb put a finger to his lips, his eyes wide. Don't speak. That's when I heard it. It was faint at first, almost like a breeze threading through the trees, but it wasn't wind. It was a melody, soft and slow, the kind of sound that made you want to stop and listen without even realizing it. It reminded me of a violin, though the notes weren't quite right, like whoever was playing didn't know the song, or the strings were slightly out of tune. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Caleb didn't move either, his finger still pressed to his lips, his eyes fixed on the trees across the creek. The melody grew louder, still distant but clearer now, weaving through the woods like it was carried on the air. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Sometimes it seemed to echo from the left, then the right, then straight ahead. What is that? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Caleb lowered his hand and leaned closer, his voice equally quiet. The music, he said, like it was obvious. I swallowed hard, my eyes darting around the darkening woods. Is it someone playing? Like with an instrument? He shook his head, his face serious for the first time since I'd met him. I don't think so. What do you mean you don't think so? I whispered, the words rushing out faster than I meant them to. I mean, he said, leaning back slightly, no one knows where it comes from. You can follow it all you want, but you won't find anything. I stared at him, my heart pounding. You followed it? Once, he admitted, his voice dropping even lower. Didn't get far, though. My dad caught me and dragged me back before I could. His sentence trailed off, his eyes flicking back to the trees. Before you could what? Before I could find it, he said simply. I turned my head toward the woods again, the melody still drifting through the air, soft but pulling at me. It didn't sound threatening. If anything, it was kind of beautiful. But there was something else under the surface, a feeling I couldn't explain. Like the sound wasn't meant for me, or maybe it was. Caleb tugged at my sleeve, breaking my thoughts. We should go back, he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. It's getting dark. I didn't respond, still entranced by the soft melody of the strings carrying through the air. Caleb tugged harder on my sleeve, his voice sharper now. It ain't safe here after dark, Alex. I still got a bike back home. We can come back another time. I hesitated, the pull of the music keeping me rooted in place for just a moment longer. The way it drifted through the air, delicate, haunting, made it hard to turn away. But Caleb's grip on my shoulder and the unease in his voice finally broke the spell. Reluctantly, I nodded, and we started the short hike back to the cabin. The further we walked, the softer the music became, until it melted completely into the chirps of crickets and the rustle of leaves. By the time we reached the edge of the woods, it was as if it had never been there at all. Uncle Frank was on the front porch, picking at the strings of his guitar with an ease that told me he'd been playing for years. The melody was simple, steady, and kind of comforting, the warm notes blending into the soft hum of the evening. It was so different from the haunting tune I'd heard in the woods, yet it was enough to calm the knot that had settled in my stomach. I waved goodbye to Caleb as he hopped on his bike, wobbling just a little as he pedaled down the dirt road. See you tomorrow, he called over his shoulder before disappearing into the trees. I climbed the porch steps and plopped down beside Frank, leaning my back against the railing. He glanced at me, strumming a few slow chords before letting them hang in the air. Creek treat you well? It was nice, I said, pulling my knees up to my chest. Quiet. Frank nodded, still plucking at the strings. Always is something peaceful about water running over rocks. Clears the head. I hesitated, staring out at the woods as the last bits of sunlight faded behind the mountains. Do you ever hear music out there? His fingers paused mid-strum just for a second before he leaned back in his chair and adjusted one of the tuning pegs. The mountains have a way of singing to all of us, he said finally, his voice low and thoughtful. Ain't a one the same. I frowned, turning to look at him. What does that mean? He gave me a small, knowing smile and went back to his guitar. It means I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Some things out here just are. That didn't exactly answer my question, but I got the sense he wasn't going to explain any further. His music picked up again, soft and steady, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the fading light. I went to bed early that night, exhaustion finally catching up to me. After saying goodnight to the family, I barely had time to pull the blankets over me before sleep took hold. But even in my dreams, the song lingered. The same eerie, delicate melody drifted through my mind, looping over and over. It wasn't unpleasant, just strange, like a tune I almost recognized but couldn't quite place. It followed me through the depths of sleep, threading through my thoughts like it belonged there. Then I woke up, cold, damp, uncomfortable. My body ached, and as my eyes adjusted, a deep unease settled in my stomach. The ceiling of my bedroom was gone, replaced by open sky and the dark silhouettes of trees swaying gently above me. A chill ran through me, and I realized I was lying in the grass, wet grass, my pajamas clinging to my skin from the dampness. Panic surged through my chest. I sat up too fast, my hands sinking slightly into the soft earth beneath me. My breath came out in short, uneven gasps as my mind scrambled to piece together what had happened. That's when I heard it. The music. Not inside my head, not in a dream. It was playing real and close. I got up quickly, my bare feet squishing into the damp mud as I cried out, "Mom? Dad?" The words barely left my mouth before the melody cut out, not faded, not drifted away, just gone like someone had slammed a door on it the moment I broke the silence. My breath came fast, uneven. The world around me suddenly felt too big. The towering trees, the endless dark stretching between them, the cold night air pressing against my skin. My pulse pounded in my ears, but beneath it I started to hear something else. The rushing of water. It was faint, but steady, familiar. I turned toward the sound, my legs shaky as I forced myself forward. The wet grass clung to my ankles, and each step sent a fresh jolt of panic through my chest. I didn't know where I was going, not exactly, but my body moved on instinct, chasing the one thing I recognized in the dark. The creek. I stumbled down a small slope, pushing past low branches and damp undergrowth until the water came into view. And there, just ahead of me, I saw the flat, familiar rock. The same one Caleb and I had sat on just hours ago. I cried out again, my voice shaking as I spun around, trying to retrace my steps back home. "Mom? Dad?" The sound of my own voice only made the silence around me feel heavier. I turned toward the faint glow of a light in the distance, the porch light. Relief surged through me like a jolt of electricity, and I started stumbling toward it, my feet sliding against the wet grass and mud. As I got closer, I saw movement, 2 figures running down the steps of the porch. Uncle Frank was in the lead, his flashlight cutting through the dark as he moved with purpose, while my dad awkwardly stumbled behind him, his footing unsteady but his face full of worry. "Alex?" my dad called out, his voice tight and breathless. "Alex, where are you?" "I'm here!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "I'm here!" Frank's flashlight beam swung in my direction, landing on me as I froze in place, shivering and covered in mud. His face was a mix of relief and something else, something I couldn't quite read. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath, hurrying toward me. "What the hell are you doing out here?" my dad asked as he caught up, his voice shaking almost as much as I was. He grabbed my arms, looking me over like he couldn't believe I was standing in front of him. I don't know," I stammered, tears welling up in my eyes. "I just woke up here." The woods became less comforting and more terrifying for me after that night. What once seemed peaceful and alive now felt watchful, looming. Uncle Frank started double-checking all the locks on the doors and windows every night, muttering something about how, "You can't be too careful out here." He tried to play it off like he was just being responsible, but I could see the way he glanced at me, his lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't have to tell me to stay inside. I wasn't going anywhere near those trees again, not willingly. But sleep, that was a different story. I refused to lie down, refused to close my eyes. Every time I even thought about drifting off, the memory of waking up cold and lost in the grass came rushing back. So I stayed by the window instead, my knees pulled up to my chest, staring out into the dark woods. The porch light illuminated the first few rows of trees, but beyond that, it was just shadows. Shadows and the melody, still faint in the back of my mind, like it hadn't really left. It was softer now, barely there, but it was there. Like it was waiting, like it was calling me back. If anyone has had a similar experience, please let me know. I don't know what it was about those mountains that just send a chill down my spine anytime I think back. My life could only be defined as an absolute nightmare. I really wish that I could have just stayed home that one Friday night, watching anime and thinking about how cute my boyfriend is. But instead, he and a few of my friends, along with their boyfriends, decided that the best way to spend my evening was at a party. For context, I'm 17 years old, and I know this is a little cliché, but I was shy and didn't really interact with people all that much. I mean, I was so anxious to talk to people that I would start trembling on the phone, even when someone I was really close to was on the other end. I never called my boyfriend unless it was an emergency. That's how bad my anxiety was. But I could manage just fine with the few friends I made during my childhood, and the fact that he, my boyfriend, was a lovely guy who never once tried to take advantage of me in any way. He didn't even push for the usual things people do in relationships. I think we had our first kiss after 7 months of dating. Unfortunately, on this particular day, they decided I needed to grow up a little. I had to leave the safety of my house and go with them to a party. As you can tell, I was not keen to follow along with their plan. "I don't want to go," I said, practically slapping my friend Jennifer on the arm when she tried dragging me toward the massive building where this illegal party was being held. "Quit your whining. Don't you know that Drake is here?" Drake being my boyfriend. Hearing that he was inside was enough to make me think about all the fun things I could do with him. We could dance, drink some booze, and just enjoy ourselves. It's not that I didn't want to do extroverted things, it's just that I didn't like doing them when there were dozens of eyeballs staring in my direction. At least that's how I perceived it. But what if I slip? Or worse, what if I spill a drink on one of the popular girls? I don't think I could go back to school after that. Jennifer rubbed her eyelids and pinched her forehead in frustration. "Bonnie, shut up for 1 second. We let you have your time throughout your teenage years, but we're about to turn into adults. How are you going to get a job?" "I don't want to get a job. I'll just become a stay-at-home mom. Or wife. I don't think I'd make a good mom anyway. And with that amount of self-confidence, I doubt you'll make a good wife either. I'm trying to help you come out of your shell. You keep putting yourself down." I looked at the massive building. I wasn't really sure what kind of building it was, whether it was an old factory or some sort of textile plant. All I could tell was that the architecture was inspired by brutalism, with large glass windows that were cracked or completely shattered. The party was loud. I could feel the bass of the stereos vibrating through the ground just outside. It was amazing that nobody had called the cops on us yet. "Are you sure we're not going to get into any trouble?" I asked. Jennifer rolled her eyes and looked like she was about to just leave me out here until I came to my senses. "Yes, you don't have to worry about it. This place is isolated. There's not even another house nearby for 10 miles. I looked at the flashing blue, red, and purple lights coming through the glass windows and the hallways that led inside. A part of me did want to go inside and do something crazy. I had watched plenty of teen dramas, and I loved the idea of being this extravagant party girl, rubbing my body up against everyone as I let loose and became the wild child. Jennifer knew that about me. I guess that's why she was extra pushy today. Don't judge her. She's just not good at being gentle with this stuff. She does the same thing to her own boyfriend. Jennifer grabbed my hand and yanked me forward before I could protest again. "Enough overthinking. Drake is waiting, and you'll hate yourself if you don't at least say hi." The inside of the building was just as chaotic as I feared, if not worse. The pounding music was deafening, beating through my chest like my own heartbeat was trying to escape. Lights flickered and strobed, casting the room in wild, almost disorienting colors. The space was packed with people, most of them strangers, though a few familiar faces popped up here and there. It was a sweaty, wild mess, and I immediately regretted being here. "Bonnie, breathe," Jennifer said, practically shouting over the music as she gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. "Find Drake, stick with him, and you'll be fine. You'll even have fun, I promise." I wasn't convinced, but I nodded anyway, looking through the crowd for him. He wasn't hard to spot. He had this natural, relaxed confidence about him that made him stand out, even in a sea of people. But the crowd was so dense that getting to him felt like an impossible task. Jennifer gave me a nudge. "Go find him. I'm going to check on Aaron. Don't just stand there like a deer in headlights." And with that, she was gone, swallowed up by the crowd before I could even respond. I hesitated, my feet glued to the floor. This was worse than I'd expected. People were bumping into me left and right, laughing, dancing, and shouting as if they didn't have a care in the world. I envied them. How could they be so comfortable, so uninhibited? My hands started to shake, and I clenched them into fists to try to stop it. I couldn't just stand here forever. I'd stick out even more if I did. I spotted a quieter corner near the wall and darted toward it, dodging people as best as I could. Once I was there, I pressed my back against the cold concrete and tried to steady my breathing. This was a mistake. I should have stayed home. What was I thinking? "Bonnie!" A familiar voice snapped me out of my spiraling thoughts. I looked up to see one of my childhood friends, Ellie, weaving her way through the crowd toward me. Her bright red hair was impossible to miss. "Ellie!" Relief flooded through me as she reached my side. Ellie wasn't much of a partier either, but she had this quiet confidence that made her seem at ease in any situation. She grinned at me, holding up a plastic cup filled with something bright and fizzy. "Jennifer told me to find you," she said, her voice barely audible over the music. "You okay?" I shrugged, which was about all the response I could muster. "You look like you're about to bolt," she said, giving me a sympathetic look. "But don't worry, Drake's here somewhere, right? Let's find him." The mention of Drake was enough to stir me into action. We started making our way through the crowd together. Having Ellie by my side made it a little easier, though I still felt like every eye in the room was on me. Of course, that wasn't true. No one was paying attention to me, but my mind refused to believe it. As we pushed deeper into the crowd, I caught sight of another familiar face. Max, my other childhood friend. He was leaning against a table near the makeshift bar, looking as out of place as I felt. His lanky frame and awkward posture were almost comforting in a strange way. He waved when he saw us, and we made our way over. "Bonnie," he said, smiling. "I didn't think you'd actually come. Ellie thought that you would start puking just from the thought of it just outside." "Yeah, well, here I am," I said, forcing a smile. "Drake's looking for you," Max said, pointing toward the far end of the room. "He was asking around a few minutes ago. I think he's over by the DJ booth now." "Thanks," I said. He was looking for me. That should have been a good thing, right? But now the pressure to find him felt even heavier. Ellie and Max exchanged a glance, and then Ellie nudged me gently. "Go. We'll hang back here if you need us, okay?" I nodded, swallowing hard as I turned toward the DJ booth. My heart was racing again, and my palms were clammy, but I forced myself to move forward. The crowd seemed to part and close around me like waves, and every step felt like an eternity. Already my shirt was becoming drenched in sweat, and I hadn't even made a single dance move. Finally, I spotted him. Drake. He was standing near the DJ booth, talking to someone I didn't recognize. His smile was easy and genuine, the kind of smile that could light up a room. When his eyes met mine, his face lit up even more, and he raised a hand to wave me over. "Bonnie," he called, his voice cutting through the noise like it was meant just for me. I froze for a split second, the anxiety almost pulling me back. But then I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and made my way to him. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. And we did dance. I mostly kept myself on the furthest end of the dance floor, a section where few people were even near. Thankfully, Drake was understanding of my fear. My goodness, I loved him so much. I don't think I can even begin to define just how lucky I am to have someone like him. He's a churchgoer, works as a cashier at the local market, and doesn't steal from them. And he's always been good at school, though nothing exceptional. But none of that really matters to me. It's the way he treats me that makes all the difference. It's as if I had been handed the best hand in this card game called life, and I wasn't about to let it go for even a second. Unfortunately, life always seems to throw in a wild card, and this one was not something I believe any normal person could handle. After about an hour, I got separated from Drake again. I was with Jennifer. She had dragged me away from him, although he said he wanted to go with some friends upstairs. Apparently there was a stairwell that they claimed you could hear spooky sounds coming from. I wasn't about to do that, so I was glad to go with her. "So are you having fun?" she teased. "A little." "Good, my boyfriend drank too much and is currently puking his guts out outside." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." "Who cares?" He always tries to impress people. He keeps thinking he has an iron stomach, but I know well enough that guy can't even handle one bloody scene in a horror movie. As much as I love Jennifer as my best friend, she had a tendency to go on tangents about trivial, and dare I say, diva behavior. Honestly, I think she has main character syndrome. I feel like the side character in her life, but she keeps me around because she probably thinks it's character development to act caring towards someone like me. Deep down, I know she'd rather just go off and do the craziest things on the dance floor, but she wants to play the good friend. Not that I'm saying she's a bad friend, it's just that I know she wants to give in to her selfish side sometimes. And honestly, don't we all? I started looking around through the torrent of people, but I couldn't spot Drake anymore. It had been well over 15 or 20 minutes, and it was strange that I couldn't see him anywhere. "Is he still by that stairwell?" Jennifer glanced around, shrugged her shoulders, and said, "Maybe." "How should I know?" I pulled away from her, walking toward one of the hallways. I thought I saw him go down earlier with Ellie, Max, and some guy named Brant. Jennifer trailed behind me for a moment but got pulled away by her second friend group. She's part of, 9, I believe. So I was left alone as I made my way near the stairwell. The stairwell didn't look like anything out of the ordinary. Then I heard something coming from further down the hallway. Even with the loud music, I could hear it. It sounded like a distant scream. I thought about turning to someone nearby for help, but I got cold feet and decided to investigate on my own. Now I know what you're thinking. If I'm such a scaredy cat, why would I be willing to go into a dark hallway by myself at a wild party? Well, 1, I was worried about my boyfriend, and 2, I really don't make the best decisions when I'm put on the spot. Walking further down the hallway, I could feel an almost tangible tension in the air. It was like the atmosphere around me was constricting, pressing against my body, but something still dragged me forward. I needed to know what was going on. I just heard a girl scream. Did she need help? Was she being attacked? Was it some unruly guy grabbing her, or maybe some girls picking on her? As I moved into another hallway, I noticed a faint light bulb illuminating this particular section. My mouth suddenly went dry. Thank God I hadn't drunk too much earlier. My foot slid across broken concrete on the floor, chips of it scattered everywhere. The place looked like one of those terrifying scenes you see in abandoned hospitals in horror movies. I couldn't believe how cliché this all felt, yet it was undeniably real. Then I heard something skittering behind me. I turned quickly, my heart racing now that I knew something, or someone was there. But it was the same empty hallway I had just walked through. The skittering came again, this time from behind me. I spun around toward the direction I was heading, but I still saw nothing. Somewhere far away I heard the sound of glass shattering. And then suddenly, a light turned on, leading up a flight of stairs. I moved closer to the first step, looking up nervously. "Hello?" There was no reply. I thought about turning back, but the skittering came again. I turned toward the main hallway, the one leading back to the party, and saw something dark move into a nearby room. I froze, terrified. I didn't want to go back that way. The skittering came again from the opposite end of the hallway. There were at least 2 or 3 people, or things, in the hall with me, and it was freaking me out. It couldn't be Drake, it couldn't be Ellie. They'd never try to scare me like that. The air was cold now, a draft coming from the stairwell. My stomach twisted, and I thought maybe I should just go up the stairs to get away from whatever was lurking here. Anything to avoid those creepy people, or things, down the hallway. I started climbing the stairs as quickly as I could, turning each corner with the stairwell. Nothing was following me, but I didn't stop. The higher I went, the darker it got. Finally, I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Climbing up to what I believed was the 3rd floor, I stopped abruptly, shocked by something that seemed to divide right through the stairwell. Above me was nothing but solid darkness, an impenetrable black mist that seemed to swallow my flashlight beam entirely. No matter how much I angled the light, it couldn't cut through. I thought about turning around, but then I heard that skittering sound coming up the stairs below me, growing louder and closer. With no other choice, I stepped forward and passed through the black mist. On the other side, I stopped and stared in disbelief. It was daytime. Sunlight poured down from above me, warm and bright, yet my waist was still submerged in the inky blackness below. I lowered my head back through the mist, and what I saw left me speechless. Night. The same dark, cold stairwell I had just climbed, but when I lifted my head again, it was daylight. For a moment, I thought someone must have spiked one of my drinks. That was the only logical explanation for what I was seeing. But there was no time to dwell on it. The skittering sound was getting closer, pressing eerily through the stairwell. Panicked, I ran up the stairs, needing to get away from whatever was chasing me. At the top, I found myself standing in front of a window where sunlight burned through the filthy glass panes. It should have been a comforting sight, but it wasn't. Grotesque, writhing vines coiled around the edges of the window, their twisted, pulsing forms unlike anything I'd ever seen. The air up here felt rancid, thick with a sour, burning smell that clawed at my nostrils. I moved up to the final fourth floor, my footsteps hesitant and shaky. The building was still the same crumbling, dilapidated structure, but the plant life was warped, mutated into something straight out of a nightmare. The walls and corners were overgrown with otherworldly vegetation that twisted with malevolent, parasitic intent. My chest tightened with a rising sense of dread, but I forced myself to call out, "Is anyone here?" Nothing but utter silence answered me. I waited for a response, but none came. My voice should have echoed in the empty building, but instead it felt swallowed up, devoured by whatever was lurking in this warped space. The grotesque vines around the window twitched slightly, though there was no breeze to move them. They pulsed faintly, almost alive, their surface glistening with some slick, dark substance. I took a hesitant step forward. The sour, acrid smell intensified, burning my nostrils and leaving a metallic taste on my tongue. "Drake?" I called out again, quieter this time. No answer. The light from the window didn't feel right. It was too harsh, too bright, yet cold at the same time. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor, bending in directions that made no sense, as though the sun above wasn't anchored to any single point. The vines along the edges of the glass quivered again, and I swore I heard a faint, wet sound like something slithering inside them. I moved deeper into the floor, looking at each doorway, which either had a metallic door barely hanging on or one completely missing. One door in particular caught my attention. It was slightly ajar, light spilling out from the crack. I didn't want to look. I told myself to keep walking, to ignore it, but my feet betrayed me, pulling me closer. As I approached, I realized the light wasn't warm or inviting. It was pale and sickly, flickering like it came from some dying source. I pushed the door open with trembling fingers, and what I saw made my stomach lurch. The room inside was covered in the same writhing vines, but they were thicker here. In the center of the room was a chair, and in that chair sat a figure. At first, I thought it was Drake. My heart leapt. But as I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't him. The figure was slumped over, head hanging, its features obscured by a mass of black tendrils that writhed and burrowed into what should have been a face. The body twitched occasionally, small, jerky movements that made my skin crawl. "Drake?" I whispered, though I was still under the impression that it wasn't him. The clothes were different. The figure's head jerked up sharply at the sound of my voice, and I stumbled back, nearly falling over. The tendrils parted just enough to reveal something underneath, something pale and wet with too many eyes staring directly at me. I turned and bolted out of the room, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I reached the stairwell and froze. The darkness I'd passed through earlier was gone. It was just an endless drop down to the next floors. My only exit back to where I came from had abandoned me. Behind me, the skittering grew louder, closer. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to know what was following me. I ran down the stairwell, ignoring any thoughts of what might be waiting for me below. Once I was back on the first floor, I bolted down the hallway and emerged into the large, spacious area where the party had been held. But it was gone. The entire space was now an empty, desolate, broken chamber. There was no music, no people, no laughter. Just more of those terrible vines crawling along the walls and floor. Panicked, I sprinted for the exit. The moment I stepped outside, a blast of cold air hit me. There was no snow, but everything outside was red. The trees were sickly red. The grass was the same crimson hue. Even the air seemed tainted with a faint reddish glow. The sky, thankfully, was still blue, but something about it felt wrong. And then I saw it. A massive the trunk of some impossibly enormous tree stretched high into the sky. It was so colossal that it seemed to go on forever, reaching the very sun itself. And I mean that literally. The trunk traveled onward and pierced the sun, which hung dim and pale in the middle of the sky like a cold, withering sphere. Remember when I said the lighting felt harsher earlier? Well, here's the thing. It was. The surfaces around me looked brighter, sharper, like the light was beating down on them with an unnatural intensity. Yet when I looked up at the sun, it seemed no brighter than a full moon. It didn't hurt my eyes, and the light it gave off was weak, lifeless. Nothing about this made sense. The trees, the grass, the crimson-tinged plants. They weren't just red because of the season or a trick of the light. It was like their very chemistry had been altered. I ran into an open field, my breath visible in the freezing air. The cars that were parked along the road were unusable, their metal frames twisted and suffocated by thick, writhing tendrils. Strange flowers had sprouted from these tendrils, their petals shimmering with a sparkling golden dust that spread into the air like smoke. I tried not to breathe too deeply as I crossed the field. When I glanced up again, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The massive tree trunk piercing the sun wasn't alone. There were others. I counted 6 or 7 similar trunks sprouting from the sun, each stretching out in different directions. Some seemed to extend toward the planets in our solar system, as if reaching for them like monstrous parasitic arms. But one trunk stood out from the others. It was longer, infinitely longer, wrapping around the sun and spiraling outward into the void of space, its path disappearing into the stars. What in God's name? I whispered, frozen in place. My voice trembled and my heart raced as I stared at the scene. What was I supposed to do? What was I even witnessing? The shimmering dust in the air began to suffocate me, not physically but mentally. The knowledge that it was floating all around me, that I might be inhaling whatever it carried, filled me with dread. Pulling my shirt over my mouth and nose, I accidentally tripped over a particularly thick vine and hit the ground hard. I desperately tried to cling to my shirt to keep it over my mouth and nose, but as I got up, the ground started to move in certain spots. Rising out from the tendrils, more bodily figures started to jerk about, snapping all of their heads in my direction. Seeing that I was in as precarious a situation as this, I turned around and they started to chase after me. They weren't really fast, but more of them kept popping out of the ground, each one determined to wrap its emaciated arms around me and drag me down. I ran back toward the building, thinking that it might offer some safety. I could feel my lungs burning, and my body was freezing up because of the chilly weather. I went back inside the building, feeling as if the entire place was starting to come alive. I couldn't understand what was going on, who these people or whatever they were now were, or what they wanted with me. "Bring the untouched to us," their voices called out in a shrill and loud chorus. I returned to the 4th floor again, wanting to get as far away from those things as possible, but still I heard the skittering sound. I kept looking every which way, so terrified that I actually started to cry and accidentally peed myself. I was just so devastatingly scared of what was happening, and I really wanted to go back home. To my friends, to my boyfriend, to my mother and father. I just wanted to get out of my comfort zone, not get thrown into a sick and deadly nightmare. I found a secluded room where I huddled in the corner in the fetal position. I kept thrusting myself back and forth, shaking as I glanced nervously at every vent and hole in the wall. Those vines were everywhere, and there was no way to avoid them. But then I started to think for a moment. After about 10 or so minutes had passed, I needed to find my way out. I couldn't just sit here and hope that someone was coming to rescue me. I needed to escape. But I wasn't able to convince myself that I would be brave enough to go back out there and face whatever it was. So, like any person who suffers from mental illness, I pretended to be someone else in my own head. I thought of myself as Drake for a moment. What would he do? I had to think like a man. Getting back on my feet, I looked out the door and saw that no one had followed me. This was the only reassuring hand that I was dealt. As I walked around, I heard a staticky sound coming from a nearby radio. It was at the other end of the corridor, and when I came to the last room, there was an old setup station. There was a bed, a desk with a radio, and when I turned up the volume, I could hear a message being repeated on a loop. "This is to all survivors of North America. If you are hearing this, you may be one of the few survivors left. The infestation has spread to the entire planet and has taken hold of our entire solar system, stretching out from star to star. We do not know where this parasitic plant originates, but it consumes everything that generates heat and seizes any nearby planets. It grows at an astonishing speed, and it is believed that it will take over the entire galaxy within the next 190,000 years. There is no way to stop this mysterious plant, and we implore you to make sure that you keep your mouth covered with a gas mask. Cherish these final days with your family and friends if you have any left. There is no way to overcome this infestation. We have tried everything here at the WHO Biological Research Facility, yet everything has failed in our attempt to spread a biological agent that may kill the infestation. Until then, stay away from any of those who have become infected with the pollen of the flowers. You will come under its influence and die. The message started to repeat, and I wondered how this radio was still working until I saw that it ran on a battery. I wondered how long ago the person who switched it on had left. Were they even still alive? But I didn't have much time to think about this because I could hear the skittering yet again. I was getting a little annoyed by whatever it was that was trailing behind me just out of sight. When I turned around, I thought it had already disappeared, so I was taken aback to discover that a creature was actually in front of me. It had several eyes on its head, was unusually tall, and its body was covered in blackened veins. The creature stared at me for a few seconds, and I was paralyzed with fear. I swallowed and looked around the room to see if there was anything I could use to defend myself. The creature came slowly toward me, and as I stood there, frozen, it lowered itself to eye level, grabbed its lower jaw and pulled it down until its mouth was wide open. As it exhaled, a burst of hot air struck me in the face, and the stinging sensation caused me to close my eyes. I ended up wetting myself yet again because this thing was just so terrifying to be in the presence of. When I opened my eyes, it had stood tall and moved to the side, spreading a hand forward as if allowing me to pass by. As I turned to leave the room, it spoke in a low, guttural, rumbling voice. "We will use you for our breeding purposes." I can't tell you just how freaked out I was when I heard that sound. I didn't know what they meant by breeding, but I was sure there was no consent in the matter. So my feet started pounding the concrete floor harder than they ever had before. Down the hallway, I could hear an outbreak of shrill, disturbed screaming bleeding throughout the entire facility. No, it was like the entire world was starting to scream, maybe even beyond Earth itself. Perhaps whatever this creature was, it was conscious of everything going on everywhere it had spread. It was taking over every star in the galaxy, killing everything in its path. And now it wanted me. But just as I was about to throw myself out of a window because honestly I wasn't going to be used for such a terrible purpose, I saw that the stairwell had that black mist again. My heart leapt with joy as I quickly ran down those steps, leaving behind that world. Until I slipped the moment my feet went through the black mist. When I opened my eyes, everything was dark. My head throbbed, and my body felt like it had been crushed under the weight of something massive. For a moment I thought I was still in that nightmare world, the sound of skittering lingering faintly in my ears like an echo. My chest tightened, panic creeping back in. "Bonnie, oh my God, you're awake." The sound of Jennifer's voice pulled me back. I blinked, disoriented, as I saw her face hovering above me. Behind her stood Ellie and Drake, their faces pale and worried. They were in the stairwell, the very same one I had descended into the black mist. "What?" My throat was dry, my voice barely a whisper. "You fell down the stairs, dummy," Jennifer exclaimed, her tone frantic but unmistakably trying to mask her own fear. "What were you even doing up there? You've been gone for like 5 minutes and then we found you just lying here." 5 minutes? No, that wasn't right. I stared at her, the confusion swirling in my head like a storm. "No, I went up. There was a—" "Shh, don't try to talk," Ellie said softly, kneeling beside me. "You hit your head when you fell. You're probably really disoriented." But I wasn't disoriented. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd lived. That wasn't just some bad fall down the stairs. I had been in another world, with impossible creatures and writhing, grotesque vines. My body still felt that terror, the cold draft of the stairwell, the sting of that creature's breath. Drake knelt down next to me, brushing some of the hair away from my face. His touch was warm, grounding me in a way that nothing else could in that moment. "You scared us half to death," he said softly. "Are you okay? Can you move?" I nodded slowly, though my limbs felt heavy and sluggish. I think so." "Good. Jennifer said, her tone shifting back to her usual annoyed self now that she'd seen I wasn't dying. Because you've officially ruined this party for me. We're getting out of here. Despite her words, she helped me to my feet with Ellie and Drake supporting me on either side. My head was spinning, my mind reeling as I tried to process what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Had the fall caused me to dream up that horrifying world? I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Bonnie, seriously. What were you doing up there? Drake asked as we made our way out of the building. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I don't know. I think I just got lost. He gave me a puzzled look but didn't press further. Jennifer rolled her eyes. See, this is why I tell you to stay out of creepy places like that. You have no sense of balance or spatial awareness. She never once said that to me today, but I let her words wash over me, too distracted by the lingering feeling of unease settling in my chest. Regardless, I was relieved to feel that warm night air. When I got home, everything felt wrong. I wanted to believe that being back in my room, wrapped up in the familiar comfort of my bed, would make me feel safe again. But no matter how many blankets I pulled over myself, I couldn't shake the chill that clung to my body. I glanced at my phone, its light illuminating the dark room as I scrolled aimlessly, trying to distract myself. My friends had all texted me, checking in to make sure I was okay, but I didn't have the energy to respond. Even Drake's messages went unanswered. My body felt heavy, my chest tight. Every breath I took felt labored, like something was sitting on my lungs. And then I saw it. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, the faint glow of my phone playing tricks on my eyes. But as I pulled back the sleeve of my shirt and held my arm closer to the light, my stomach dropped. Thin, faint red veins were spreading beneath my skin, branching out like tiny cracks in glass. As I stared, horrified, I swore I could feel something moving inside me. No, I whispered, my voice trembling. No, no, no. I scrambled out of bed, running to the bathroom and flipping on the light. The veins were spreading, stretching up my arms and toward my chest. My breathing quickened, panic setting in as I lifted my shirt to inspect my torso. The veins were there too, faint but undeniable, creeping like roots toward my heart. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My skin looked pale, sickly, and my eyes didn't look right either. The whites had red, tiny capillaries visible where they shouldn't have been. My mind raced, replaying the events of the night. That creature, the one with the blackened veins and too many eyes. Its breath. I had felt it on my face, hot and stinging. Oh God, I whispered, my voice cracking. It's inside me. I staggered back from the mirror, clutching my chest as a wave of nausea hit me. My mind was screaming at me to do something, to call someone, to get help. But who could I even turn to? No one would believe me. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face as the reality of my situation set in. It was growing inside me. I'm finishing off this message to let you know that I won't be seeing tomorrow. After seeing what it did to that other world, I'm going to try and do something drastic. Mom, Dad, Drake, everyone, I love you all so much. I'm going to take that canister of gasoline and go into the woods and set myself on fire. Anything to stop it from getting out. If that world couldn't contain it, then I'm going to do the one thing that may be able to prevent it from spreading here. I am dead in any case, but I just know this is going to hurt a lot. I am relating this so you will at least have a solid understanding of why I had to do it in the event that you come across a news story about a teenage girl who set herself on fire in the woods. Sorry to all of you. I did not intend to endanger anyone's life. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Goodbye. It all started in 2012 following my 5-year-old brother's death. Grief made itself at home in the deep wound left by the loss of our mother only 3 years earlier. I was only 9 years old, too young to endure such agony. Then again, I don't know whether anybody would be able to bear what I've seen and felt. After Eric passed, it was just Dad and me. But I felt in a way as if I'd buried my father too, or at least buried the version of him I'd once known. Eric's funeral seemed to break him. In fairness, my father has always been inward and reclusive, but he became worse after my brother died. Some nights he'd leave my dinner on the table, then I wouldn't see him until the morning. I miss Eric, I tearfully confessed one evening. And Dad simply replied, "We need to move on, Lorna." Maybe that would have been easier if I hadn't felt so isolated. Knowing what I know now, however, I wonder whether I should be thankful. I was a meek child, and trauma has left me a meeker adult. the meek go unnoticed, and that may well have saved me. At some point in late 2012, I spent the weekend with my grandparents, and when I returned, I immediately noticed quite a pronounced difference in the house. "Where is it?" I asked as I lugged my suitcase across the upstairs landing. "Where's what?" my dad asked in a flat tone. I nodded my head at the white plaster on the ceiling above. "The attic door." He frowned. "We don't have an attic, Lorna." I rolled my eyes. "Very funny, Dad. What's between the ceiling and the roof, then?" "That space is structural," my father said softly. "It's not accessible." That made no sense to me, but I was young, too young to question my parents' supposed wisdom. Of course, I knew the attic door had existed, but I assumed that Dad had been playing a practical joke. That filled me hope. Hope that, for the first time in many months, his sense of humor may have returned. Still, as the years went by and the attic door remained only in my assured memory, I began to feel quite uneasy. I hated walking underneath that ceiling and seeing only white rather than the wooden door which had once been there. Maybe I would have eventually got over it, would have come to believe that I'd simply misremembered my childhood, if it hadn't been for my dad's conviction that I'd lost my mind. A strange, abrasive conviction. He always seemed to be on the verge of losing his patience. Still, Dad promised that there was nothing but foam, wood, and wiring chases in the space between the second-floor ceiling and the property's sloping roof above. No space for a proper attic, according to him. Anyhow, by the time I entered my teenage years, I'd stopped asking about the loft space from my childhood. Stopped caring, truth be told. I became buried in school, then college, then university. All the while I drifted farther and farther away from Dad, and that came down to more than the ceiling. Our relationship has only become more strained as the years have gone by, and the same is true of every relationship my father forms. He broke up with Jenna just before Christmas, which turned him cold and standoffish. I've never liked him in that state, and admittedly I missed Jenna. She'd been somewhat of a warm, comforting presence in the house for the past 4 years. In spite of this, the first alarm bell only started ringing this morning, around 3 in the morning to be exact. A few hours before I needed to get up for work, I was woken by a series of noises. They came from above, 3 weighty, board-buckling creaks. It wasn't the sound of the ceiling settling, wasn't the sound of rats burrowing through those supposed wiring chases in the inaccessible loft space. Rather, it was sound that confirmed what I'd always known. Something was moving around above me, in the very real attic. But I didn't call out, didn't investigate. Instead, I clung to the edge of my sweaty duvet and lay silently, swallowing the shriek that wanted to escape. I've mastered the art of burying fear. Part of me knew that to call out would be a very, very unwise idea. The part of me that has been suppressing things since I was old enough to remember them. The things that happened even whilst Eric and Mum were alive. I remember the set of eyeballs that would watch me from the crack in my ajar bedroom door. Sometimes I'd wake during the night and see them disappear into the black. I remember the time Dad stood and watched as I, barely more than a toddler, flailed helplessly in a swimming pool. I'm sure I've forgotten worse things, but I'll never forget what I saw this morning. This morning something possessed me. Some new source of courage, or more likely, delirium. My dad went to work and I had time before my shift, so I went into the garage, fetched a sizable hammer and returned to the upstairs landing. I took to the ceiling with a series of swings, tearing a hole through the white plaster with alarming ease. At first I thought I'd underestimated my own strength, but then I realized there'd been next to nothing in the form of resistance from the ceiling. Nothing to prevent my remodeling project. I spat plaster and dust from my wide mouth, then I eyeballed the black abyss above me. I knew it. I'd known it for 13 years. The space above the second floor wasn't filled with piles of foam and wooden beams and wires. It was a black, empty void. There was and always had been room up there. There had always been an attic. Part of me wants to end here, but I'm currently sitting in a police station trying to keep my mind off everything, so I'm going to tell you what I told them. I set up a ladder on the landing, climbed into the attic, then lit the space with my phone torch. Now, I don't know how the loft space used to look. After all, I hardly had reason to go up there as a 9-year-old. However, whatever purpose it once served, it serves a new one now. I hurled my guts across the floorboards when my light caught the first of the bodies. A woman was bundled up in a large, translucent plastic bag. A maggot-filled bag. The remaining flesh of her bloody face was peeling away to reveal a wide-mouthed skull. but enough features remained to identify her. It was Jenna. As I moved the torch beam, I nearly lost my footing on the ladder. I wasn't horrified by the sight of Jenna, not even by the sight of the many other plastic-wrapped corpses, some little more than ashes in tattered clothes. I wobbled in fear when I saw the shrine, for lack of a better word, near the back of the attic. Surrounded by fresh, burning candles were two long, rectangular wooden crates. Crates with what seemed to be sturdy lids and brass clasps. These were no crates. I know that. About half an hour ago, an officer informed me that my father hadn't returned home. They haven't found him. Sooner or later I have to leave this place, but I don't want to do that. I'm terrified. I should feel safe, apparently. The police officers have promised to get me far away from here. They've promised to watch me, to protect me. They promised not to let me out of their sight. How on earth will they keep that promise? Nobody's ever stopped my father from making things disappear before. I've got a new heart, but I don't feel young again, I just feel sick. So after the motel thing, I'm left with about 24 passengers. I notice that the ones left are mostly the ones who'd seemed more content during the initial drive-in. Not quite as jumpy, not quite as glassy-eyed. Nobody puts nothing else extra in the boxes except loom. I don't even look at what it was, since I heard the same thunk the flashlight had made when it had been dropped last night. I hope you don't mind. But I'm not feeling so great, I just want to get this out. Loom has already decided, not even half an hour after their friend died, that they can be fixed. They tell me they still want to go to Angel Vale, that they'd heard they've fixed all sorts of broken people, that they work genuine miracles. I think they're desperate, but I think that even so it's worth a try. I think no matter what happens, if you think there's a chance, if there's someone who's worth it to you, or if you even just want to be kind, it's worth a try. I don't ask my trainee to drive the bus the next morning. She doesn't seem like she'd be eager. We put the body of the cat thing in the hatch space. Loom just called it Spotter, and I'm not sure if that was a nickname they'd given or not. If you don't say their name, the one that actually means them, then they can't be dead. I guess that's what they must have been thinking. Only the dead don't have to follow the rules. It's quiet. The drive to the hospital. Some of the folk I think I've mentioned before, they can feel when you're prying into their business. Like when we feel eyes on the back of our head and get goosebumps. Some folk also have it the other way around. They just know when something private is happening. I get barely any souls on my bus that morning, and I think it's because everyone sensed that morning dread coming off my vehicle. I'll be honest. It's not the first time I felt like I wasn't driving a bus, just a glorified hearse. A part of me still thinks that sounds about right. My trainee didn't drive, but she did sit up top this time. I saw guilt in her every feature. Posture, the twitch of her nose, the way she just leaned and looked out the window. She only looked right. I saw one of the rabbit folk, one of the ones that were left, go over to her. They sat in her seat with her and they hesitated a moment. They reached out their hand and put it on her shoulder. I watched in the rear view. Saw my trainee kind of frown at them, then they pulled each other into an embrace. I felt like I was looking at myself then. I've looked into the mirror plenty of times, saw a sad husk of an old fool looking back. And I never really liked him. And few folk ever came to my side to hold me like that. But I told myself, see, I said, driver, you daft knucklehead. If you keep thinking like that, nobody ever will. And I told myself too. And what about the folk out there looking at themselves just like you are, who just need to get somewhere thinking like that won't make sense anymore? So I kept driving, like I did then. I thought of the walls. Loom had called them boring, but nice. To me, that smelled of safety, and that was something I wanted so badly. But you retire when you can't do your job anymore or when the job is done, and neither applied yet. Eventually, the landscape went through enough colors and faces that it pulled up Angel Vales. The road there felt familiar, in more ways than one. It sat in the middle of a suburban area, probably the leftovers of some city or other. Tall, white, boxy, with glass windows that ran across most of its length. It had two taller sections that stood all prideful above the rest, which reminded me a bit of castle towers. I think they were called drums or some such. Maybe rounds. All of the windows had curtains or blankets over them or were boarded shut. The sign outside the hospital has a name that ain't scratched over. Welcome to Angel Vale. They didn't bother scratching out the other parts, except the arrows pointing to places that no longer existed. It had some kind of street address that was all garbled nonsense. I suppose so you could find it, even though it was probably not where it was supposed to be anymore. The thing that I cared about was the rules. Formality and partial effect. Hospital rules as follows. Please do not bring hazardous food, drink, or materials inside. Please do not bring weapons inside. Please do not take up the doctor's time unless you feel ill or suspect yourself to be, or are in denial of being so. The only thing that will be punished is fully cognizant theft and harm. Please consider that we cannot operate on those who did not give consent first. Advance pre-authorization is recommended. I think this might have been where I'd spent that sick time at. Was that after the lodge showed up, the tunnels? I've got my recorder back. I listened to everyone on a loop. But I think maybe some part of me is wanting to forget now. To freeze up and stop making decisions. It wants to let the roads fade away forever and to let me start shutting my eyes and ears to everyone else. I think I really thought about it, but I remembered I can't. It's not always the world that wants you to forget, or the things in it. Sometimes it's just you. I pull up, I see there's a bus stop, posts and all. I figure I must have driven a lot of people here and from here. Easy to find, easy to forget if you don't have to go inside. But today I had to. All the rabbits filed in with me, and so did my trainee and loom. I asked some of the rabbity sorts to help me carry the spotter, and to my surprise they did. I guess when you can hear everyone's hearts, you can tell whose is in it when someone does something not quite proper. The receptionist checked us in. I didn't even flinch this time when they asked me if certain things had changed, when they told me I'd been checked in multiple times before. All the half-rabbits follow my lead, and Loom gets a guest pass. My trainee checked herself in around this point, kind of melted into her herd. My head was full of fuzz, and I think she'd noticed. The halls were white and prim, little black and white tiles running under my feet. It felt odd, like I was leading a flock as my trainee and her folk trail after me, feet padding or squeaking or shuffling along the floor in echoes. A lot of people peeked out of rooms as we passed them, made faces of all sorts at the noise. Some shook their heads as they ducked back in. We passed hanging signs, telling us where we were going. The herd broke up and filtered itself into wherever they needed to go as we went. I saw things like hidden injury, trade mishaps, varied therapy, operation, long-term visit-stay, and legality navigation. The last one had me raising my brows. I squinted, adjusted my glasses, and there was a little subtitle under it reading, "Check here first. If the results of treatment in relation to formality are unclear, society legality will advise." There was a big cardboard cutout of an arrow pointing towards it right next to it, and if I traced my steps a bit, I saw smaller arrows painted onto the walls guiding towards it. Well, I guess that must be important. When I said that, one of the rabbit folk looked at me, stared. Then they went that way. A lot of them had gone towards hidden injury, varied therapy, operation, all sorts of problems for all sorts of folks, and a lot of them end up bugging you right after you fix another. When I got antsy later, walked around a bit, I noticed a lot of this signage had ECFK approved under it, followed by something sounding like job title located here. I think the ones that didn't were for specialists, maybe, or just for folk that didn't want to deal with whoever that was. A lot of the hospital wings, that the right word, had dupes. The rest around here is a tad boring, so I'll spare you. We find a doctor who chats a bit with Loom. I step out, sit and alternate between roaming and antsy foot-tapping in a waiting room. My trainee sits with me and it registers she was gone for a bit. I frown a little. "There's so much going on lately, you doing okay?" I ask. I mean it, but I probably sounded a little out of it. "I am." She paused, shook her head. "Number are you?" I try my best to be. I can't tell most of the time, honest. I smack my lips, rub my hands against my legs. I'd felt a little sore in my legs. I was having a hard time thinking what to say, too. I'm sorry I didn't help. You couldn't. You aren't strong enough. I balk for a second, then sigh. I guess. That's what you're for, though, ain't it? I tried to smile, but it was shaky, and I think I just sounded desperate. Maybe I'd been putting too much pressure on her. She doesn't say anything for a bit. Eventually, she tilts her head. "Have you ever felt strong?" "What you mean?" "Like you could really do anything. Anything you wanted, like you were doing your job right." She thumps her foot lightly on a loop. "Like you belonged." I get some kind of half-flashback, suck my bottom lip. "Might have. I think at the office, maybe." I think I've been doing this job a fair bit of time. What keeps you going? She stops looking at me, puts her eyes towards the blanketed window instead. There's only a handful of souls in the waiting room with us. It's quiet, a little dark, but in a peaceful way. When I get those little letters. Before that, when I looked through the things I'd gotten. When I picked someone up and they said they were pleased as punch with how things were going. I answered pretty quick. It's easy to do when you're sure of your words. I think maybe, though, it's when I feel lost, I've still got the bus. When I see someone else who's lost, I can use it to make them not so lost. Things don't always go well, but sometimes I can make them better. But not always? No, not always, but enough. She looked at me funny. I don't think she believed me. I don't think I did either. It's hard sometimes to look at the positives when hell is just around the corner, or something worse. And sometimes I think that it's easier to go there yourself than watch someone you care about do the going. We talked for a while, about little things, stuff I'd gotten paid with, a few particularly notable drop-offs and pickups. She told me about a few places she wanted to see, some stuff she wanted to do. When I asked her if she still wanted to drive, she said yes. Then she asked me something again. Do you wish you still drove alone? I blinked at her. Sorry? Do you ever think it's better to be alone? She watched one of her kin walk down this way. When I looked their way, they looked real deflated. They fussed with a stitch, keeping a human hand on a not-so-human torso. I saw them pull one out of place and winced, wondered if I should get up and check on them. I wish folk would just let us stick our nose in their business sometimes. Strange thought to have, I know, but I can't help if I don't know what all's wrong. Sometimes, when I need to think, but I don't think I'd ever want to be alone forever. I'm sorry. 4. Not coming around sooner. She smiled at me, a smile that trembled a little. I held her hand, returned the grin, but I'm not sure I should have smiled at that anymore. We sat there like that, not making another peep, for maybe half an hour or so more. Loom came out, sat down with us. They said they can't do anything, they announced. Their light was as dim as their voice. That, they'd just get taken again after. I told them I did not want that. They apologized. They looked up at me. Can you take me somewhere they can do something, please? You must know somewhere. But I didn't, and I didn't know how to say that. It broke my heart. They didn't need me to utter a word. They watched me shake my head all slow-like and knew my answer. They said they'd wait for someone who could. I saw them get up and move over to the long-term visit stay area. I watched them go with a big frown. I can drive the bus, but I can't guarantee someone will be happy once they're dropped off. Some people are just worse off when I do. I can't control how things shake out, just how folk get places. My trainee got up, said she'd go check on them. I don't know for sure where they actually went, though. I fell asleep in the waiting area chair I'd hunkered down in. I was tired in more ways than one. I woke to the sound of rabbits squealing. When I opened my eyes, all startled, I saw the one that had been picking at its stitches up at one of the windows. It was ripping down one of the curtains. Someone glued or otherwise stuck it to the frame somehow, but they fixed that with a scalpel I have a feeling they hadn't asked to have. I saw a nurse, a lot of them looked the same when I thought about it later, move over to M. Please refrain from harming the decor. He looked real concerned, pulled gloves out of his pocket and slipped them on with a snap. They stood there for a second, paced instead of reaching out. I think they were trying to figure out what their wiggle room was in hospital rules. When they saw the scalpel, they went rigid for just a second before lunging. They tried to pull the rabbit folk down to the ground, probably thinking to pin them and call for someone else, but they got kicked in the abdomen. This one had rabbit feet, so it probably hurt. I saw him double over. The rabbit broke through the window. That is, they backed up a bit, ran forward, and jumped. Glass shattered and went everywhere, glittering in the moonlight. The moon was full in the sky, and the stars shone so bright I swear if you pulled down the moon they'd fill in just fine. It started to float. I didn't hear the thud of a body hitting the ground. They just went up, real slow and gentle-like. I caught the reflection of an earring and a necklace coming off them. Can't remember if they'd come in with it. Before they went high enough I couldn't see them anymore. I shot up to my feet. I called for my trainee, started moving down the halls. Careful at first, wasn't sure what was going on, but the moment I saw another flash of fur and stitching I went towards it. All the nurses started moving around. I heard a voice call over the intercom. Please stay in your rooms. If you've not been admitted or signed in, you are given free permission to enter areas present staff is willing to guide you to. About the same time, someone grabbed at me, said something about shelter. I ignored them, elbowed them hard enough I sent them into a wall. I had a split second of panic, but rules be damned if I was going to wait and gawk while my apprentice was in danger. I felt terror wash over me like it hadn't in years. I think, end of day, my greatest fear isn't going away. It's being alone. I follow the sounds of squeaking shoes, squealing, thumping and growling. All sorts of other noises filter around me, but I ignore them. Everything except that faint music. The statusy voice that came over the intercom that wasn't owned by any doctor. And somehow it managed to drown out the sound of shattering glass, tearing fabric, and nails being ripped out of boards. Go to the roof, I don't want her back, I don't know how to take them back yet. Not in a way they should be. I almost stop to help one of her folk that I pass, but I figure I can't wrestle them down. And I get selfish. I think strangers aren't as important, even though everyone I've ever known was a stranger first. One of the nurses comes by and nods at me. They've started going in groups. I see them pull someone away from a window. It looks awkward, they're half floating, half being dragged inside. They tie him to a bed with straps all while they're screaming, let me go, I need to go home," and trying to bite. I pray I'm making the right decision. I find some stairs, thinking the elevator is too slow, pound up. My own feet sound screeching in my ears, and I don't bother counting how many flights I go up. I just go. I stumble, hit a wall, and get a purple bruise on my arm. I push myself back to my feet, whisper some encouragement to myself, and I burst through a metal door onto the top of the hospital. My trainee is standing on what looked like one of those emergency helicopter pads. Didn't look like it had been used in years, but I had a feeling I didn't want anything taking off from there. Above me, the night sky bled with twinkling dots, and the cold chill sings with a song that feels deeply familiar. Overlaid on top of it is a voice, one that I stopped listening to. There's a more important one right in front of me. She's wearing that costume with the dumb little tiara. I see the stitches on her neck are half off. Her head hangs loosely. My throat catches. I almost freeze up, but I force myself to step towards her. She's humming the song I'm hearing, hands behind her back, fidgeting. She's got the recorder she'd been using. She hits play. I think she wanted me to hear her, the real her, before she left. I don't want that to be all I've got left of her. So I try to drag her back. Come on, let's go back to the bus, you. I'm going somewhere better. Better than the mall. Better than the walls. I can take you anywhere you want to go. Anywhere, just... I want to be where I need to be, not where I want to be. She turns around, she's crying, little black-brown eyes all wet. Do you think I'm human or an animal? What? It don't matter none, Yurt. It does, though. She steps towards me. I think I'm ugly. I think I don't belong. I think the beautiful and wonderful things down here aren't for me. She cocks her head. Doesn't it hurt you too? Trying to help people, know them, then they go away, and sometimes it's your fault. It does. It hurts a hell of a lot. But if I'm not down here, I can't do a lick of good. Stop. Stop worrying about them. Let me take you somewhere for once. Let me take you somewhere. Quiet and safe. Look. She points up. I see a little moon next to the big one, hiding in its shadow. It's red instead of white. I see a building on the moon, but I don't think that's where it wants to take her. I have to stare for a while to make out the other thing in the sky. I see someone in a suit, all white with a round helmet with a black shining face. I know for fact I'm not supposed to be able to see it so clearly, but I can, and I can see the cord coming from its back. Like one of those tethers astronauts use to keep with their vessels. It's coming down. Not fast, but it's coming down. I see them now. The other rabbits. There's about a dozen floating up towards it. I watch them. They seem dazed out of it, like they're overcome with some euphoria. Then they snap back, and they're breathing hard, and the only reason they're not screaming is because they're scared it'll make things worse somehow. That's not a good place. She told me her name. I just don't use it. I didn't want anything to hear, to find her. You're not ugly. You've got a good heart, and you've always kept me grounded. I reach out to take her hand, and she lets me. I hold hers in mine, both, and my hands are shaking. She frowns, shakes her head. You're getting too old for your job. Why don't you just... No, you won't listen anyway. She doesn't let go. She holds my hand tighter. I see her start to change position, and I realize I'm the only thing holding her anchored to the earth. Her folk come out, the ones that had looked not so displeased with what they looked like and where they were. They call her name in chorus, start grabbing at her, try to pull down the others that weren't so high. I see one has a ladder, but it can't get them as far up as they need to be. Something grabs at my trainee. I see her smile, a real wide one that looks like it hurts. But she's crying. She mouths, "Don't let me go. Please." But it's got her. I see that suit wrap its arms around her, gentle as if she was a newborn. I see that its tether is wet and slick in a way it shouldn't be. It smells all sorts of strange, rancid but sterile. I see its helmet open, and I see something that should be long dead that wasn't. I hear the sounds of rabbits and something choking. I think it whispers something, but it's not for me. Its real voice calls to me. "I'm sorry. We can't hold on to her. Not long enough, my arms give out. The rabbits around me keep grasping at the sky, calling, shouting names. Hospital staff comes up behind us, just watches in silence. I don't fault them. I think they tried their best. At least I choose to believe that. I watch her go up for a bit. It feels like watching an angel pull someone away, but if you knew damn well it wasn't one and you had no idea what heaven actually looked like. I go down the stairs. I use the elevator this time, and I go out to the bus. I go right into the hatch. I root through all my things, and I can't find any secret solutions. I feel guilt, wondering if she thought I was leaving her behind. I come back up. I've not used one in a long time, if I ever have. I never gave back the rifle that witch had left on my bus. I didn't think I'd ever have the guts to use it. It's real hard to hurt someone when you never know who's confused and who's really after blood. But I force my shaky fingers to make something resembling a proper aim. Loom comes up. They let me borrow their light. I try to shoot that fake astronaut in the face. It's peering right over her head, watching me like it's taunting. I see a bullet go right through its helmet, but it doesn't seem to care. I wonder if I can hit that cord, but it's so far up. One of the rabbits holds my arm. They look up at my trainee. "Please no," I whisper. But I know what they're thinking, and I picture all those people I'd seen over the years just disappear. That lady with the umbrella, Ori. I don't know where they're at now. I don't know if they're suffering. I don't want her to find out for me. It takes me a few tries, but I get her in the center mass. I watch her choke on her own blood for a bit. I watch the light leave her eyes. But she smiles. I think she died afraid. But I think she'd rather die down here than figure out what parts of her daydreaming were real and what were nightmares up there. I pass the rifle. I don't got much ammo. I'd traded for some along the way, but not much. I don't stick around to see how many go back to Earth. I just hear the shots. I think someone tries to catch me. I move towards the stairs. I think I was going off to find someone to help me move bodies. Or maybe I was just being a coward and didn't want to look at hers. I stumbled, and I hit my head on the way down the steps. I blacked out. When I woke, it was in a hospital bed. I felt spreer than I should have. And when I asked why, I got an answer. I put two and two together. When someone's a friend, they can give gifts freely. That's why you need to be careful with your words out here. They can come into your safe places. They can break little rules just for you. There's some gray, but mostly it's just, you trust them, and you find out whether or not you should have sooner or later. I trusted her. But I don't think she trusted me. I think she didn't want to lose me either. I freeze up in the lights when things get tough sometimes, or I'm hot-headed and pretending to be in my prime. I think I could run a marathon if I wanted now, but I just want to drive the bus. I just don't want to do it alone. Were you silent because I haven't spun my yarn well enough? Or was there just nothing that could have been done to help in the first place? Maybe it was always going to turn out like this. Maybe I should have kept a closer eye on things. On people, roads, things that were said and that I needed to remember. But I'm just human. I'm just human. I wonder if the world could ever be as magical as she thought it was. I don't know when you'll hear from me next. I've got to sort some things out, I think. I can't feel the road so well anymore, so I might be driving for a while, but I'll try to come back. Someone has to drive the bus. For now, that's me. It should have been her, too. I live in a small town in Vermont. I won't tell you its name, mostly because I don't want to draw any attention to myself. I moved here 6 months ago to take over this record store that's been a town fixture for yonks. The previous owner, Martin, was desperate to leave. Practically gave the place away. His hands shook so bad he could barely sign the papers, and he kept looking over his shoulder like he expected someone or something to be standing there. Should have been my first clue, but when you've been living out of your car, scraping by on part-time work at gas stations and dollar stores, landing a deal like this feels like winning the lottery. The store barely breaks even, but it came with a small apartment above the store, a kind of attic flat with a little kitchenette and a serviceable bathroom. The pipes groan at night and the floorboards bitch every time you take a step, but it's warm, safe, and has an awesome view over the rooftops. At first, it felt like I'd stumbled into some perfect slice of small-town Americana, the kind they put on postcards or in those Hallmark movies my mom used to watch. Victorian homes built from locally quarried stone line the winding cobblestone streets. Neighbors wave but don't pry. Weekly farmers markets in the town square where old ladies sell jam in mason jars with handwritten labels. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business but pretends they don't. My first morning here, I was in the shop rearranging the store's inventory when Sheriff Tapper poked his head in. He's an older man with cheeks that never quite recovered from acne in his youth, a slight paunch and a too-calm voice that always leaves you wondering if he's hiding something. He offered to show me around the record store, basically just pointing out the dusty corners and the old fuse box. But before he left, he fixed me with a serious look. "Listen," he said, tapping a calloused finger on the old wooden countertop. "Since you're new here, there might come a time you notice some weird shit scratched into your door. If you see anything like that, you come to me right away. Day of, no excuses." He tried to keep it casual, but his eyes gave him away. "Probably won't happen to you," he added quickly. "But if it does, we like to handle it fast. You absolutely have to tell us, got it?" I remember staring at him, a half-smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, sure it was some kind of joke. Sure, but why? Who's doing it?" Tapper just waved a meaty hand, dismissing the question like smoke. "Wouldn't want to scare you off on your first day," he said, and walked out, letting the shop's brass bell announce his exit. I chalked it up to small-town eccentricities, maybe some local pranksters who like to scratch up doors. But early the next morning, I noticed the sheriff walking the length of Main Street, shining his flashlight on every door, examining them one by one. He did it methodically, like a doctor checking stitches, looking for something very specific. When he caught me watching from my second-floor window, he gave me a curt nod and moved on. He does this every morning, every single one, without fail. Rain, shine, or New England blizzard. A couple of months later, I was up before dawn, flipping through dusty vinyl records, when I heard a low, rhythmic stomping. Peering through the concert posters plastered on the shop's front windows, Kurt Cobain's dead eyes staring back at me, I saw them marching by. Mothers in thick wool coats, their faces set like stone. Men clutching garden tools and kitchen knives that gleamed dully in the pre-dawn light. Old Mr. Harrison from the hardware store had his Winchester cradled in his arms like a sleeping child. I followed them. I don't know why. Maybe the same morbid curiosity that makes you slow down past a car wreck. They converged on a small blue house near the town square, the kind with gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch. The woman they dragged out was still in her nightgown, her feet bare against the cold cobblestones. She didn't fight back. She just kept shaking her head, tears cutting clean tracks down her dirt-smudged cheeks, begging them to give her more time and, "Don't you see this is all bullshit?" Eventually, her words dissolved into raw screams about how they were all crazy, her fists beating away at anyone who tried to approach. The crowd's response was a wall of sound. Accusations about overstaying, warnings about putting us all at risk, demands that she honor the arrangement. I thought about calling the cops, but there were in the crowd too. Local badges shining in the golden dawn, uniforms crinkled and unironed like they'd hurried to put them on. 20 minutes later, someone pulled up in a pickup truck already loaded with boxes and suitcases, like they'd packed her belongings before even getting her out of bed. They pretty much dragged her kicking and screaming into the passenger seat, and the truck disappeared down the mountain road that leads out of town. After that, the mob dissolved, and that whole day I didn't hear another word about it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment above the shop, listening to the wind whistle through the gaps in these old windows, and tried to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Small towns can be insular, I told myself. Maybe she'd done something to deserve it. The next morning, I took a walk past the blue house. Front door still wide open, yesterday's newspaper sitting untouched on the front lawn. That was when I noticed the marks on her door. 2 of them, shaped like crooked eyes, scratched deep into the wood. They looked kind of fresh, the wood around it still pale and raw like exposed bone. I took a picture and reverse image searched the symbol, but came up empty. Just page after page of actual eyes staring back at me until I had to close the browser. Figured maybe it was unrelated. Told myself that coincidences happen all the time. Life settled into a rhythm after that first morning. I threw myself into running the store, learning the regulars' tastes, ordering rare pressings they'd mention offhandedly. One customer in particular, Cal, would spend hours browsing the jazz section, talking about Miles Davis and John Coltrane like they were old friends. "You've got good instincts," he told me one afternoon, carefully sliding a Thelonious Monk album back into its sleeve. "Most newcomers, they don't." He trailed off, his weathered face clouding over. "They don't last long enough to learn the ropes." I couldn't help myself. "Like that woman? The one they drove out my first week here?" The vinyl sleeve crinkled in his suddenly tight grip. "Don't go thinking we're a bunch of bullies. That was a kindness," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "If she'd stayed, she'd still be gone, just in a different kind of way." He set the record down with trembling hands and left without another word. 2 months passed. I was getting comfortable and starting to feel like I belonged. For the first time in as many years, I was earning a weekly wage, went to bed full each night, have money left over to furnish my loft just how I liked it. It was odd, almost novel, having a place I could call home, except for that one morning with the woman in the blue house, and Sheriff Tapper walking past each morning to inspect doorways. This place was nothing short of heaven to me. Then one morning the parade of footsteps returned. This time they came for old Abel, who'd run the bakery for 40 years. Everyone knew Abel. He donated day-old bread to the food bank and remembered every kid's birthday with a free muffin. The scene was different this time. Abel hugged each person in the crowd, tears in his eyes, but a gentle smile on his face. "It's time," he kept saying. "I'm just surprised it took him this long." The mob was somber, some people openly weeping as they helped him pack his truck. I checked out his door the next day, and just like the blue house, there was a symbol etched into the wood. Just one this time, staring out like a cyclopean eye. I asked around about these symbols. Some folks brushed me off, others gave evasive answers. But one thing was consistent. If your door got marked, then you had to leave town immediately. It was said to keep everyone else safe. There was talk of consequences, of some looming danger no one wanted to describe. Like a shadow you catch in your peripheral vision but disappears when you turn to look at it. It became clear the sheriff's morning inspection was his way of catching these scratchings early. He'd warned the inhabitants to leave. Sometimes they went peacefully, like old Abel. Sometimes, when the marked was a newer person in town, they put up a fight. No one ever explained who or what made the marks. The best I could piece together was that after 3 markings, something bad happened. Last night I was doing the final count of the register when rapid footsteps approached the shop. I glanced up, ready to wave away another late customer, when someone started pounding on the door with such urgency that the bell above it jangled. Through the concert posters I could see Cal's familiar silhouette, but something was wrong. His normally relaxed posture was rigid, and he kept shifting from foot to foot like he was standing on burning coals. I opened the door. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the autumn chill. "Listen carefully," he said, the words tumbling out so fast they blurred together like cars in a highway pileup. One hand gripped my shoulder with crushing force. "No matter what happens tonight, stay inside. Keep the lights off, TV off, absolute silence, lock everything." His eyes darted to the lengthening shadows that crept across the cobblestones. "If someone knocks, if they ask to be let in, don't move, don't make eye contact through the windows, and whatever you do, do not respond." "Cal, what's going on?" "The Peterson family," he explained hurriedly, his breath coming in short gasps like he'd been running. 3 markings. They covered it up with paint, didn't want to leave, left us wide open. His grip tightened painfully, then released. "I can't say more, rules, I need to get home before dark." He checked his watch and his face impossibly went even paler, like all the blood had been drained out. Oh God, I might already be too late. He sprinted away before I could stop him, his footsteps echoing off the old buildings. I stood there with the key half turned in the lock, watching him disappear around the corner. I followed his instructions, though I felt ridiculous doing it, like a kid hiding under the covers from the boogeyman. But something in his voice, that raw animal fear, had sent ice water through my veins. I'd never seen someone so genuinely terrified. Not even that first woman they'd driven out of town. The evening crept by in suffocating silence. I sat in my darkened apartment watching the streetlights flicker to life outside. Every creak of the old building settling made my heart skip. I kept checking my phone, considering calling Cal, but his warning about absolute silence held me back. The first knock came at 12:07 a.m. I know because I'd been obsessively checking the time. It was soft, tentative, like someone testing if the sound would carry. 3 gentle taps, evenly spaced, coming from the shop's front door downstairs. I held my breath, Cal's warning echoing in my mind. For a long moment, nothing. Then it came again, harder this time. A rhythm of desperate needs, and then... "Hello?" The voice sliced through the darkness, and my blood ran cold. It was Cal's voice, edged with the same fear, but quiet, like he was trying not to get caught. "Please, I didn't make it home in time. I've been stuck out here in the dark for hours." I laid there, heart beating in my chest. Then I told myself I was being stupid, that this town was weird and superstitious, and if Cal was in trouble, I couldn't just leave him out there. What kind of person would that make me? Still, I walked quietly, each step careful and measured, like I was crossing a frozen lake. I crept to the stairwell, tiptoed through the shadowy vinyl store where album covers seemed to follow my movement. Through the door's frosted glass, I could make out a shadow. It was roughly Cal's height and build. "Please," the voice cracked, hitching on a sob that sounded like it was being torn from deep inside. "Please let me in, it's so cold out here. So dark." The smart thing would have been to stay silent. But I had to know. "If it's really you," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "tell me your favorite record in the store." The silence that followed dragged on and on. Then came the response, in a voice that was both Cal's and not Cal's. I don't know." Ice crawled up my spine like 1,000 tiny spiders. "Leave," I managed to choke out. "Now." A pause. Then something outside laughed. "Didn't he tell you?" it whispered, and I heard rather than saw a long fingernail trace its way down my doorframe. Not to respond to anyone who came knocking. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on the first stair. The shadow behind the glass seemed to grow, spreading like a stain, darker than the darkness around it. I took the stairs 2 at a time, slamming and locking my apartment door behind me. I dragged my heavy oak dresser in front of it, then huddled in the corner of my bedroom as far from any windows as I could get. The knocking continued sporadically through the night, moving from window to window, accompanied by Cal's voice trying different tactics. Pleading, demanding, bargaining. Around 3 a.m., it started cycling through other voices I knew. Abel, the woman from my first week, then a voice that sounded oddly like my own. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices seemed to seep through my fingers, straight into my brain. Sleep was impossible. I watched the clock tick through the endless hours. Finally, dawn broke to the sound of screaming. This time, the mob moved with purpose, but their usual grim determination had been replaced by fear. Sheriff Mills was already at the scene, his face the color of chalk as he waved people back. The mob had led me to a house 2 blocks away from my own, the Petersons' place. I recognized it because they'd painted their door recently, a cheery yellow that had seemed out of place in our somber little town. The door was hanging off its hinges now, splinters of wood scattered across the welcome mat like broken teeth. Blood was everywhere, pooling on the welcome mat where Home Sweet Home was now just Home Me, trailing into the darkness beyond the broken door like breadcrumbs leading into a witch's forest. A police constable was scraping at something on the door. Fresh paint, still wet, hastily applied over familiar eye-shaped symbols. There were 3 of them. Must have been covering them up each morning, I overheard Tapper whisper gravely. They didn't have the best life. Reckon they had nowhere to go. Whole family, someone else whispered, drowning out his words. Tried to cover up the scratchings. You can't hide from them. They always know. I found Cal in the crowd, his face gray as week-old snow. This wouldn't have happened if they'd just told the truth, he said, shaking his head. If they'd just followed the rules. Why? I asked, desperate. What is this? I can't say. He attempted a reassuring smile that looked more like a grimace. But you should be safe, so long as you follow the rules. His expression shifted, became sharper, more focused. You didn't hear anything last night, did you? Open the door? Talk to anyone? I hesitated, then shook my head. Nothing. The lie tasted like copper on my tongue. The bodies were wheeled out in black bags as the sun climbed higher. Back home, I checked the front door to the vinyl shop compulsively. No markings. I exhaled slowly, relief flooding through me. Maybe I could make this work. Sure, the town had its dark secret, but didn't they all? Some towns had corrupt mayors. Others had toxic waste dumps. Ours just had whatever this was. And hadn't they taken me in when I had nothing? Given me a home, a purpose, a place to belong. As long as you followed the rules, you could survive. People here did it every day. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, rehearsing all the reasons to stay, all the justifications for looking the other way. The mental gymnastics we do